Welcome into Transfer Portal Palooza. That is right. The transfer portal is officially open. There are changes to it this year. There are changes to it with the spring transfer portal window, but we are here to walk you through it all and tell you that everything has happened because I think our boy Chris Hummer over there was on the phone literally seconds before we started this. Things are happening fast and furious. He's the man with all the intel, and we got Cooper Tagna here to help us out with the scouting. I am Emily Proud. If there is breaking news, we will bring it to you live. But guys, a lot of the hay is already in the barn. What, 2,400 entrants into the portal today, Chris? What has it been like for you so far?
Well, it's been an adventure. We're not quite to 2,400. We're at 24, let's see,
that's
65.
Not bad,
Yeah, so like basically nothing.
Keep them coming. We got plenty of room in the portal.
It's for context, guys. Usually the day one of a cycle, you would have max 1,200 guys. There were 500 players within 5 minutes of midnight Eastern time last night. So it has just been absolutely crazy. But that's what happens when you move the portal window like they did. The NCAA wanted to shorten the time span. They wanted to give teams more time to prepare. They wanted to give teams more time to pitch for players to stay. And then everything happens all at once. It's
been wild. I saw you posting at midnight tonight when things are happening, things about visits, interests, all of these things. But Coop, from your standpoint, anytime a guy enters or even before it's official, you're having to put a grade on him. So what's it been like keeping up with all that?
For the last month, our team at 24/7 Sports, CBS Sports, has done a tremendous job. And Chris alluded to the number being around 2,400 just today, FBS players. I have graded probably around anywhere from 12 to 1,300 players already that already made their declaration, and guys from FCS to D2, obviously FBS. So it's been a little bit different. I felt like last year when we were grading all these players, the majority of the guys were already committed. You're just trying to, you're being more reactionary, right? This time around, it's different because you're really kind of getting to see how the market reacts to some of these guys that are going in. And really the last month or so, as the season has winded down, I feel like it's just been almost kind of like this moratorium, like negotiating period, right? And today, it almost feels like the start of free agency. It's open, and a lot of these commitments, declarations, visits that have been weeks and weeks in the process of lining up are now taking place, and we're seeing, obviously, all that information being publicized.
Yeah, and you've been incredibly busy as well. As soon as a couple hours ago, changing the rankings in terms of having a new number one player. That is a quarterback, which means we're going to talk a lot about quarterbacks. I know that there are already some people in the chat right now that are asking about what Miami should do at the quarterback position. You guys have some time. You're still playing in the college football playoff right now, so there's time for that. But that's what makes it so exciting, Chris, is that things just keep coming fast and furious. But before I forget, I mentioned YouTube in the YouTube chat. If you have any questions, I'm going to do my best to keep track of everything that's going on. We'd love to hear from you, but also you should take advantage. Today, we have a promo code portal that you can use to get 60% off subscriptions on 24/7 Sports. You want all that intel. You want all the great information that is coming from our insiders all across the 24/7 Sports team site network. That is where you find it. So 60% off an annual VIP membership by using the promo code portal. If you are watching us on X, you can use the hashtag portalpalooza to submit some questions. But guys, I have tons of questions for you, so I'm going to start just firing them here fast and furious. Chris, as we give kind of the lay of the land in terms of how this year is different from last, we mentioned the fact that this portal has opened a little bit later. It'll go through January 16th, and then that's it. There's no spring transfer portal window. So how has that changed the math both for players and for teams as they get ready for today's, what Coop called it, opening of free agency?
Well, the opening, it feels like this is the opening, but pre-tampering was happening for a while for sure. But as one director of player personnel has put it to me recently, there's no safety net. You can't miss in this cycle. You also have to project all your needs. You have to make sure your roster is in a competitive enough place going into the spring where you feel comfortable. Teams have gotten very used to being able to go in the spring portal, go take a depth guy from a G5 team that they want to poach because it's very easy just to fix a hole in their roster at that time. You can't do that anymore, and teams have had to be very aggressive. And for the players, you have a little bit longer of time to make a decision, like technically, like until January. But this stuff has been starting since like mid-October. Like these guys have had to have visits lined up for a couple weeks now. So you've had to move pretty quickly too, and it just puts the players in a tougher spot where they have less time to decide. Graduates have to decide if they're going in before they graduate in May, for example. And it just speeds up the timeline for everyone.
Yep. The transfer portal is open, meaning that players can enter the portal during this 2-week window, but they can make their decision as far as where they're headed at any point. But as you mentioned, Chris, you are actually up against it when it comes to the academic side of things as well, and actually entering some of these schools. But Coop, from your standpoint, as you're evaluating players, we already had rankings a couple weeks ago because we hear the intends to enter. How challenging has it been for you to just kind of track who's actually in, who's potentially in, and making sure that you're shuffling them accordingly?
Yeah, our guys make that very easy for me, just in terms of the rankings. Once the guys are in or there's a declaration, you just really kind of react to that. And once the smoke is out there, you're prepared for it. I think there's too many guys that have declared for the portal in order for you to say, all right, I've heard some smoke around player X entering, and it's like, I don't have the time to invest in a guy that may or may not be entering the transfer portal. I think the other thing that's interesting that I kind of wanted to add on to what Chris was talking about in terms of the timeline. I think a part of this transfer portal that maybe we're not talking about enough is like guys like Dante Moore, guys like Bray Hubbard at Alabama, Whit Weeks at LSU. It's important for programs like LSU, Alabama, and Oregon to get a decision from those guys whether or not are you going or to the NFL, or are you staying and coming back here for another year? Because now that the transfer portal is open, as Chris talked about, there is no plan B in the spring transfer portal, and things move very quickly, right? So that's something that I think we're going to have to monitor, especially when it comes to Dante Moore in Oregon. What's going to happen with him? I think there's been a lot of talk and conversation that he could come back to school. If he decides to go, what do the quarterback dominoes kind of look like, and how is that going to be impacted here over the next week or so?
We've already seen Oregon connected to some of these quarterbacks, which should have us transition perfectly into this quarterback class. It's already incredibly impressive in the fact that last year we had 3 total 5-stars of any position in the portal. We already have 5 5-stars here, 3 of them being QB, 1, 2, and 3. Sam Leavitt is the #1 player in the transfer portal as of this moment. Again, that happened earlier today. Things continually change. But if we look at Sam Leavitt, he's an interesting prospect to talk about because, Chris, he entered with a do not contact tag. So just explain to people what that could possibly mean and why he would do that.
It can vary. I think usually when a player goes in with a do not contact tag, it indicates that he already knows what he wants to do. He's asking schools not to reach out because, like you decide before you go in the portal. Like tampering never happens in college football, as we know. And you just kind of make a decision. But in some cases, it means they have a limited pool of schools that they're considering, and they don't want to be bombarded by 136 FBS programs. So it can be kind of a measure to prevent teams from reaching out. Leavitt's case is interesting. I know we're going to get into this a little bit. He's been a difficult one to follow because we've been aware that he's going in the portal for about 1.5 to 2 months at this point. But the feedback you kind of get behind the scenes from the top schools has been a little mixed. I don't think he's been a #1 target for any of the top tier QB schools, at least as of yet. Those things can always change. And it's made following this process a little difficult at times. A school I'm watching currently is Kentucky. Kentucky is a program that I know is the two sides are working to set up a visit. I think ultimately it probably will happen. And Kentucky's interesting. Will Stein obviously is the head coach. He's produced multiple draft picks the last couple of years. I know Cooper loves to compare Sam Leavitt to a mix of, Bo Nix and John Mateer. And obviously Will Stein coached Bo Nix and turned him in a first-round draft pick. And Joe Sloan, the offensive coordinator, coached Jaden Daniels, coached Garrett Dustmeyer. There's a lot of offensive firepower and brain power in that room, and it's a fit on paper that makes a lot of sense. But I do think other schools are trying with Leavitt. I do think other schools are trying to keep Leavitt warm. So it's a very interesting one as Kentucky makes that push.
So Sam Leavitt, the former Arizona State quarterback, won Big 12 championship with that team 2 years ago. So has had a lot of experience, has had success. What do you think of that potential matchup with a Will Stein, who's had a ton of success coaching quarterbacks as the offensive coordinator at Oregon? I
love it. I think this is what the college football transfer portal is all about. And you get a marriage and a talent like Sam Leavitt, a guy that we have ranked as a #1 prospect. And I know there's a lot of varying opinions just in terms of maybe the football character a little bit and why teams view him the way that they view him. But in terms of the talent, there's no arguing that. And then with Sam Levitt, I think the other thing is like pair him with a guy like Will Stein, and you think of the credibility that Will Stein has had to be able to attract a guy like Dante Moore to come to Oregon. And I get the financial piece of it, but to be able to sit behind Dylan Gabriel, that's a big piece. And then you see the result of that this year in Oregon making a deep playoff run. And then a guy that was able really to tap in to the Bo Nix potential that I think everybody thought that he was very capable of, but we didn't see at Auburn. Sam Levitt is a guy, when you talk to NFL scouts, there have been a lot of positive reviews just in terms of the way that he's wired. Mm-hmm. I talked to one team today that said, on our scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the highest, you'd have him as a number one. That would be very rare just in terms of, the way that this guy is wired from an intangible standpoint. So I think he's looking for a fit where he says, hey, I'm going to go to a place that's going to challenge me. Mm-hmm. I know who I'm going to be coached by. I know this coach is going to have credibility. And right now you can make an argument that Will Stein is one of the best quarterback coaches in the country, especially with the guys that he's developed over the last 3 to 4 years. And that would be hard to argue. And if you're Will Stein, I mean, what a way to get your tenure started in Lexington and Kentucky. And the thing about this is he's a foundational piece, and just being able to attract more talent to Lexington, get more eyes on Lexington, it would be a huge coup for Kentucky. And I think the other thing that we're going to talk about here is like Brendan Sorsby, our number 2 ranked quarterback from the University of Cincinnati. He's got 2 visits set up, right? Mm-hmm. Texas Tech and LSU. That will happen before the end of the weekend. There's not enough quarterbacks to meet the demand of what Miami believes they can fetch, what Oregon believes they can fetch, what LSU believes they can fetch, and what Texas Tech believes they can fetch. Mm-hmm. So that means if our top 3 guys are Sam Levitt, Brendan Sorsby, and Drew Messamaker, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, you already put a crystal ball in for Drew Messamaker to Oklahoma State. If Sam Levitt were to go to Kentucky, that means one of those guys like DJ Lagway or Dylan Raiola or even Ethan Grunkemeyer down the list, and maybe that's a guy that's already been connected to another program. One of those schools is going to be left out with one of those brand names. Yeah. So I'm borderline shocked that Oregon or Miami, and maybe they know something that I don't know, is sitting there because Sam Levitt's not the guy you want. Mm-hmm. Sam Levitt's the number 1 target. You go get him in your program and you build around him. So this whole thing is kind of fascinating to me.
It's fascinating from the standpoint of the quarterback dominoes, because like you said, there's a lot of QB needy teams, not a lot of quarterback options, but still a decent amount of QBs that we will discuss and that we'll get through. But as you mentioned, Sam Levitt is the number 1 player right now in the transfer portal. Number 2, though, Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati. And Chris, you said that he's the guy that controls the market right now. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think when I say that, I mean, and Cooper, you probably view it the same way. There are a couple teams that have first pick in the portal, and it's kind of alluding to this a little bit. In this market, it's Indiana, it's Miami, it's LSU, it's Texas Tech, and there could be like an Oregon factor in there as well, yes. And there are some other schools, depending on what happens out there in the world, that might join that group, but that's the top group as of now, as it sits. And Brendan Sorsby is the guy that is associated with 3 of those 4. He's associated with Texas Tech. He's associated with LSU. And Miami was also, I think, very interested in him, although it seems like, at least right now, Sorsby is only visiting LSU and Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. And when he's the guy at the top of the market like that, and you have 2 or 3 of those 4 teams waiting, you're kind of controlling the market. Like, you have the say. And it's kind of like it was with Cam Ward a couple of years ago. I don't know if people remember, but he was he was holding things up with Florida State and Miami during the whole process. He held part of the market just for himself as he made a decision. And Sorsby is good to do that. And once that happens, once that piece is off the board, wherever he chooses to go, then teams have to make other decisions. Mm-hmm. They have to go to their second target. They have to go to their third target. And that's when the market can really start to scramble.
So we have our Matt Zenitz is reporting that he is actually going to be in Lubbock today visiting Texas Tech. You also mentioned LSU. We'll talk about maybe what a backup plan is for schools that miss out on him, but I want to get to some of your questions here in the chat. They want to know about former Old Dominion quarterback Colton Joseph. He is a very interesting prospect. His stats are ridiculous because he's played a lot of football. And before we actually answer that question, I gotta shill for likes here. We have a lot of people watching us live, so please hit that like button. We'd love to get to 100. I don't know why, just having that nice whole number makes me feel good. So hit that thumbs up button. But let's get back to Colton Joseph, because he's a guy that has 32 touchdowns, 24 rushing touchdowns, a dual threat guy. But what potential schools do you think could be interested in him? I'll get it from your perspective, then we'll get the intel.
Yeah, I think he's the type of guy that kind of reminds me of the market last year, where it was kind of like a Tommy Castellanos or a Devin Dampier who ended up at Utah. And these were these type of guys that when you go into the grading process, right, which is a little bit different from high school. High school is straight projection in terms of Sundays. That's very difficult. This is kind of like a marriage between projection and production. So when you're looking at a guy that has maybe hadn't played less than 250 snaps in their first year of college football, but they were highly touted coming on, you're leaning more on the projection piece versus a guy that, like Colton Joseph, has played 22 games. You got a little bit better of a feel for him. So he's a guy that I think can be an impact player in the right system, in the right scheme at the Power 4 level. And the team that obviously he's been linked to has been Florida State down in Tallahassee. And you can understand why he would be a fit in Gus Malzahn's offense with Mike Norvell. Very similar just in terms of play style and the athletic ability, the ability to improvise and create, similar to what Tommy Castellanos did for Florida State last year. And this guy is electric. He's a dynamic playmaker. And there's a bucket of these guys like you look at that I think Calandria would be one of those guys. He's been linked to Florida State. Jaden Craig was another guy from Harvard as well, where maybe the Sunday upside could be a little bit in question, but in terms of the impact that they can have at the Power 4 level, these are guys that are above average to good starters in the right scheme. So you need to have a vision for them. I think Florida State would be a comfortable spot for both parties where you could certainly understand the marriage on paper.
Chris, what are you hearing as far as his interest level?
Colton's been a very popular player in the portal. A lot of schools have been circling Colton Joseph since week 2 or 3 of the season. That Old Dominion offense is a favorite of kind of people in the industry. And when you talk to coaches, their offensive coordinator, Kevin Decker, is now at Memphis. But even going back to Fordham, people really loved that system and that offense. And Colton Joseph executed it excellently. He is a dynamic running threat, as Cooper would tell you. I think as a passer, some teams have some concerns and question marks, but for a team like Florida State, for example, with Gus Malzahn that runs the quarterback as much as they do, like that is certainly a player that makes a lot of sense. I think Wisconsin's also been in the mix. I believe he's going to visit Wisconsin at some point. Georgia Tech's another school that's come up in the mix with Colton Joseph. These are all teams that use quarterbacks who move, or Wisconsin's kind of been all over the place offensively the last couple of years with their changes, but and their current scheme they could. So those are 3 schools I'm keeping an eye on with him so far.
While we're on the topic of QBs making the jump levels, UNT's quarterback, Drew Mestemaker, has been a fun guy to watch this season, not just with the success that the Mean Green have had, but the fact that he goes from not even starting a varsity game in high school, walk on, to having all that success and all that production. But Hummer, you got a crystal ball in for him to Oklahoma State, of course, making the connection there with his head coach and Eric Morris, who took that there. Is it essentially the Pokes' job to lose right now?
Well, Oregon has been in the mix with Drew Mestemaker a little bit. I think Oklahoma State is in a really strong position, which is why I put in that crystal ball. I think there's a good chance a bunch of former North Texas players are on campus at Oklahoma State tomorrow visiting. I put in a crystal ball today for Caleb Hawkins as well, who I'm sure we can talk about later. But Drew Mestemaker he's the guy. Like, he's the franchise. He went to North Texas as a walk-on. He was a receiver in high school. He
punted, right?
He punted. He
backed, like, get me on the field.
He backed up in high school a player who's currently in the portal, Deuce Adams from Louisville. It's an incredible story. And Eric Morris, the head coach at Oklahoma State now, Sean Brophy, the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State now, did an incredible job developing him. And they found a diamond in the rough. And obviously, Drew Mestemaker did a lot of it himself too. Yeah. And I think there's a very strong connection between those parties. I think Drew Mestemaker has been described to me as a very loyal person as well. And I think it's going to be a very tough sell for even in Oregon, which I think is a school he grew up rooting for, to like pull him away from his coaches like that and his teammates, frankly, because a lot of them are going to join him in
Yes, and we'll bring up North Texas a lot on this show. But while we're sticking with the quarterbacks, with 3 years of eligibility remaining, he was the nation's leading passer. You have a 5-star grade on him. What did you see this season going from walk-on to 5-star in the portal?
I think that part was the most impressive. Just when you're watching him, you see how advanced he is as a passer, and it's really doesn't make a lot of sense considering the fact that he didn't start one game at the quarterback position in high school. Outside of that, I mean, just a guy from a projectable frame standpoint at 6'4", 210 pounds, still needs to put a little meat on his bone. But just in terms of the arm talent, mechanically, it's a little bit funky, but the ball gets from point A to point B. It gets to where it needs to go. And this is a guy that sees the game very well and consistently can get to a second, third progression. And for a guy, like I said, with that type of inexperience, that's very promising when you're trying to project him. I think the biggest thing is, and we saw this with Arch Manning as he got more and more exposure. We see this with a lot of young quarterbacks. It was good for him to get the experience this year to kind of play through the mistakes. There's a lot of things pre-snap, post-snap that he's got to do a lot better job with, especially when going up against pressure consistently. But I like the fact that more than likely he's going to stick with Eric Morris at Oklahoma State. We talk about quarterback development and continuity and these guys moving around and having different coordinators and why that's even an issue when you talk about quarterback development at the NFL level. So for Drew Mestemaker to have that comfort of being in Eric Morris's system and potentially have his running mate, Caleb Hawkins, with him, that's a really big deal. And I like this kid a lot. And honestly, the evaluation of Fernando Mendoza gave me a lot more conviction in him, just in terms of saying, okay, Mendoza is a guy that you would say has above average to good tools, but the intangibles of playing the position, from the timing, the anticipation, the ability to go through progressions, the pocket awareness, another thing that I haven't talked about, Mestemaker, those are all things that are very difficult to coach, right? And in some way or some form, you can't rep that out of a quarterback. That's just kind of an inherent trait that they learn how to develop over time. So Drew Mestemaker has that. And I would love the potential fit there at Oklahoma State, similar to how I would like the fit of Levitt at Kentucky, because of how you're able to instantly change the perception of a program like Oklahoma State that had gotten so far away from the standard of what we had become accustomed to.
And I will say with Oklahoma State, I think walking in that door, that they knew that would be a rebuild. Like, this is a rebuild at Oklahoma State. They had to tear that thing down from the roots and start over. And what somebody like Drew Mestemaker allows you to do is you could skip a couple steps. Like, Cooper's done way more of this than me, but one of the most difficult things is finding a quarterback who can be a game changer, finding a quarterback who's a difference maker. And by getting Drew Mestemaker to come aboard, which I think they're going to do, that's your Pied Piper. That's somebody the rest of the cycle that can sell for you. And it's just a huge, massive deal for them to be able to get that to work. And we've seen these quarterback play caller tandems work in the past. I mean, Eric Morris did it at Oklahoma State with Cam Ward back in the day. Like, he has a lot of experience with it. And it would be a really big deal for Oklahoma State to get this done, because it's been a rough couple of years in Stillwater, to be frank.
That is kind of the assumption that we make too, with the fact that the coaching carousel has been so wild, is that's a potential pitch within the room when you're interviewing for these head coaching positions, is who are you bringing with you? Who are these players? You know, we make the connection potentially with Byron Brown from USF following Alex Golish to Auburn. And so that could have been something that Oklahoma State heard and we're like, yeah, we like what you did at North Texas. Can you bring that up to Stillwater? Yeah,
when you have a $3 million, $4 million caliber quarterback that, as Chris said, you get to skip a couple steps and then all of a sudden becomes a little bit more attractive. And then all of a sudden
and you're building on what you've already done. You're not starting fresh.
Right. And then, a lot of people look at Eric Morris, and the more you start to investigate him, learn more about him and the job that he's done with Cam Ward, John Mateer, some of the quarterbacks that he's been around, you're like, wow, this guy's really
Patrick
really
Mahomes,
impressive.
right?
Patrick Mahomes.
Just that guy.
Yeah. And, we saw it with Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer, right? I mean, Brent Venables went into this season on the hot seat and came out with a first-round playoff loss. But they had one of the hardest schedules in the country, and they exceeded expectations. So at Oklahoma State, that's a big deal, being able to obviously get the head coach quarterback as well.
So we talked about the 5-star quarterbacks so far with Sam Levitt, Brennan Sorsby, Drew Mestemaker, but there are a lot of 4-star guys, a lot of highly ranked guys in the 90s. Of course, we've talked about not us on this show, but in the last month when all these guys have entered, DJ Lagway, Raiola, Deuce Knight, Byron Brown is somebody I mentioned. But the chat wants to know a little bit more about Josh Hoover, the TCU quarterback. I feel like 2 years ago is really when we started to learn his name because of the production. And while it went somewhat down last season, this is a guy that still puts up a lot of numbers. So we'll talk about first kind of the rankings process with him. You got a 93 grade on him. What have you seen from him?
Might be a tad low. I went back and forth on, is he a 93, 94 at the end of the day? He's a good quarterback. I think more of that probably had to do is how do the NFL teams kind of see him, right? And I think there's going to be a variety of opinions on him. But he is a guy that is a high-level operator and distributor of the football. And this guy has played a lot of football as well. He did a phenomenal job at TCU this year. I think some of the things that maybe would be a knock against him when you're evaluating him, all right, does he have those physical traits that are so projectable to a day one NFL draft choice? I don't think the teams that are courting him don't care much about that, right? Because they know the type of guy that they're getting. And from an intangible standpoint, from a high floor standpoint, this is a guy that's played a lot of ball, and he's a plug-and-play option. And those plug-and-play options are hard to come by, right? And we talk about that floor, like for contenders, if you're Miami, if you're Indiana, if you're Texas Tech, if you're any one of those guys, you want to plug in a guy that fits your timeline that is going to come in here and check all those boxes, not only from a physical standpoint and experience standpoint, but a locker room standpoint. Josh Hoover might not be the first name that's mentioned, but I do think he is one of the most important quarterback pieces in this class. And I believe there's a team that's been linked to him throughout the process that I think would be an absolutely beautiful fit.
Who's that? Indiana?
I'll let Chris do it.
Well, ironically, it was the team he was committed to once upon a time as a high school prospect, which is Indiana.
Yes.
And yeah, Emily's on it. It's a fit that makes a lot of sense. Like we've seen what Curt Cignetti has done with quarterbacks the last 2 years. He's produced 2 draft picks, one in Curtis Rourke with good physical tools who ended up getting drafted coming out of the MAC a year before, and one with great physical tools who could go number 1 overall. And Josh Hoover's much closer to the Fernando Mendoza bucket of tools than he is Curtis Rourke. I'm not trying to step on Cooper's toes here, but people that have been around Josh Hoover that I've known for a long time, I live in Texas, I know people that worked with them are very complimentary of it. And I think it's a fit that makes a ton of sense. I mean, Indiana's not the only school that swung there. Schools like Missouri and I think Kentucky have been interested. Indiana's been the school that's been very consistent at the top of Josh Hoover's process, at least talking to people from my perspective. And I think it would be a pretty ideal fit for both sides.
I love that you mentioned Missouri because they're a name that has come up quite a bit when talking about these quarterbacks. Obviously a need there with Bo Pribula entering the transfer portal. Somebody that they've potentially been connected to, per our Matt Zenitz, DJ Lagway. Baylor, Louisville, Virginia, again, Mizzou have been a school that's attached to him. Chris, when you're looking at the interest level in DJ Lagway, he's an interesting guy because he's somebody that's a 5-star coming out of high school. And Coop, you've said this numerous times, I'm sure you will continue to today, which is the projection versus the production. That's all projection there, Chris. What are you hearing as the interest level in DJ Lagway?
I think teams are very interested in DJ Lagway, but it's with a bit of a caveat. You know what I mean? Like
cautious about it. Well, can we fix him is the big question.
It's that, and also like what he can do to a room. And like, I'm not saying that in a negative way. Cooper could probably speak better than me. But this is a conversation I had with somebody about DJ specifically yesterday. It's like DJ Lagway is a huge name. Like he is a presence in the space. Like he is a potential first-round draft pick, talent-wise. And when you recruit a player like that, when you openly recruit a player like that, it can mess up your quarterback room. Like you can scare somebody in the portal. And I do think that kind of has an effect on DJ where he's coming off a season where he didn't have his best stuff. Like teams view him as like maybe a slight bit of risk, although the upside is there. And then you also add in like the factor that he's DJ Lagway. It's a complicated one, which is why I think, and I mean, I've heard the same schools, like Virginia's come up a lot with me for DJ Lagway, Baylor, and I think there's some other schools looming kind of in the background as other decisions get made. But it's just kind of a weird spot for him. I think he's going to find a great fit. I think there's a lot of schools out there that really believe in DJ Lagway. Like I've been covering DJ Lagway for a long time. I'm very bullish on his future.
Texas,
yeah, and I just think it was a weird year for DJ, and with the way the market is right now, it's just kind of a weird spot for him because he's not first on like the bigger teams board, but he could come up, but you just have to be careful to manage it.
Yeah, obviously a new head coach there, and reportedly conversations didn't go well with John Summerall and his staff. The breakup could be good for both sides, essentially. But Coop, this is somebody that you very recently watched in high school, and there was a reason that you put him as one of the top arms in the class. And so what is it that you've seen from him now that he's entered college? He led FBS in interceptions this season, but was dealing with injuries, I think, to every limb that you can. So what's his projection moving forward now?
I think that has a lot to do with it, right? Like, does he have a clean bill of health? Is the durability a long-term concern? Were these things between the shoulder and dealing with the calf strain, or these things that could potentially pop up in the future? And then, in terms of the context of the situation, I think he put a lot of pressure on himself. I mean, this is a guy that was on Gatorade commercials heading into the season after the season that he had as a freshman, where he was 6-1, and he looked like he was going to be the franchise cornerstone and potentially save Billy Napier's job. That didn't happen. That didn't come together. And I think this was a season that certainly got away from him. And you mentioned the turnovers. I thought at times he was just pressing, and that was a lot of it, quite honestly. So I think for him, he's one of those guys, when you look at the market, it's the math equation of, there are a lot of teams out there, there are a lot of buyers out there, and these are teams that expect to contend for a national championship. And although the supply is high with the names that we have mentioned, if a Levitt goes to Kentucky or a Mestamaker to Oklahoma State, like I previously mentioned, then who's out there, right? That would leave a Sorsby, that would leave a Lagway, that would leave a Raiola as really kind of the top three brand consensus names out there, which if Brendan Sorsby, for example, let's just walk through this hypothetically, decides that he's going to go to Texas Tech after the first visit and shut it down. Sam Levitt decides that he's going to go to UK, and Dante Moore declares for the NFL draft. Then what's that going to look like? Some team is going to have to reach on a prospect that they were not overly convicted in. And that's when you're hearing the schools like Baylor and Virginia right now at this point, Missouri. In a couple of days from now, that could be LSU. That could be Oregon. That could be Miami. To me, if I'm DJ Lagway, I'm sitting in his corner, I'm saying, wait it out. Okay, because those teams that are keeping you warm right now, you're going to be their first option here in no less than a week.
And I will say, like, DJ's heard from some of these schools, like LSU. Like, there's been some dialogue. Like, I mean, Lane Kiffin is very aware of DJ Lagway, as we saw.
Some retweets.
Yeah. Like, they're online. You know what I mean? And
a little bit.
DJ had a pretty significant part of his recruitment that was tied to LSU for a time too. So there's a comfort there, and I can think of a couple other bigger schools that have been in contact with DJ. And I think for him, it's just kind of a matter of what you find to be the most important thing. I don't think money is a factor for DJ this time around. To be honest, like, he got paid a lot of money to be at Florida. I think it's fit, and I'll be curious what he views as the best fit. I mean, you could argue a place like Virginia makes a ton of sense for DJ Lagway with what Tony Elliott did this year and what Virginia did. You could argue the same thing about a Missouri or a couple of his other options. Baylor's home for him and his dad, who played there. So he's in an interesting spot where he's going to have some decisions to make, and how quickly he wants to go will determine how the market goes for him, I think.
So he was the number 1 quarterback in the 2024 class, the number 2 quarterback in the 2024 class, Dylan Raiola. I could continually go down the list, but let's talk about Raiola to start. How do you evaluate him in college?
Yeah, he's interesting because in a lot of ways I've had conversations with people that have also spent a lot of time evaluating him, and I wondered, it's like, has he ever moved out of the category of the guy that he is to the guy that we thought he would be? And what I mean by that is that we know he's an above average to good starter. He was completing almost 72% of his passes before he got injured. That was top 5 national. That was a Nebraska school record. But in terms of elevating the talent around him, is this a guy that's a true needle mover, and a guy that I kind of compare him to? And I'm not saying this in a negative way, because this is kind of how I see him comparable, would be more like Carson Beck. If you put him in an environment like Miami or an environment like Oregon, where you surround him with the type of playmakers and the type of offensive line and the type of running game that those programs provide, then Dylan Raiola becomes a lot more of a net positive, rather than being the guy, the analogy I always use, having to be Superman versus having to be Clark Kent, right? But has the capability of stepping up and delivering when his name is called. And I think that's where Dylan Raiola is, but he's got to find the right situation. I mean, going back to high school, This was a guy that transferred every year of his high school career, dating back to his freshman year. Nebraska, even given the success that they were having, they were 6-3 before he got hurt, decided to go a different way. And it wasn't like this amicable breakup by any means, stretch of imagination. I think this was one of those situations where Matt Rule, Nebraska, were ready to move on from Dylan Raiola. So similar to DJ Lagway, but also different. He needs to figure out his value system and what's important to him. Is that quarterback development? Is that playing on the biggest stage of college football? Is that developing into a number 1 draft pick? Because he's got the talent that a lot of NFL teams are going to be intrigued with, just in terms of the arm talent and the way that he plays the game. But this needs to be a strict business decision for him. And he needs to go to an environment that I think is going to be tough on him and challenge him to be the best version of himself. And I think that's a good thing. Everywhere he's been in his career, he's been the cherry on top. He needs to be the compliment, right? And I think a place like Miami or Oregon would really be an ideal fit for him. But at this point, I'm kind of curious to see what the market looks like.
What does it look like early on day one?
Well, I can only tell you what I know, and what I know is people in Dylan Raiola's camp would like him to be at Oregon. Whether that's a realistic possibility, we'll see. Like, Dante Moore has a decision to make. Oregon has a decision about what their portal board would look like if they decided to go that direction at quarterback. So just know that as a school, at least on my end. And again, I don't hear everything out there in the world. I hear a lot, but I don't hear everything. That's the school that's continued to come up with me with Dylan Raiola. And he's a little bit like DJ Lagway, not the same, but there's questions about him. Like, he was a 5-star quarterback. Cooper mentioned it all. He was kind of the dude his whole life, and things didn't go 100% the way he probably would have wanted this year. And I know Cooper said, like, it was Nebraska choosing to move on, but I think there was some unhappiness in Dylan Raiola's camp as well about kind of season and the team around him a little bit. You just had to give both of those situations. And I know Nebraska didn't mind taking $3.5 million off the books because he was one of the highest paid quarterbacks in college football last year. So it's one of those, it was a breakup that I think made sense for both sides. And now Dylan Raiola has to figure out what's next in his career and how he can take that step. Because if you talk to people around him, his goal has always been to compete for championships. Nebraska wasn't getting there, and some of that blame certainly belongs on Dylan Raiola as well. But I think that's the opportunity he'd like to have. Like, where he ends up, we'll see.
Yeah, which is why I think that the Carson Beck connection is something that he would love, because Carson Beck is playing in a national semifinal. So certainly it's all about fit, though. With all of these guys, I want to go to another QB with Deuce Knight, somebody else who was highly regarded coming out of the 2025 class, number 2 player in the state of Mississippi. Where do we think the Auburn QB goes? Anybody?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at a text. Ole Miss is a school that's come up for me early with Deuce Knight. Boston College has as well. Kenyatta Watson's the general manager there, played an instrumental role in getting Deuce Knight to Auburn in the first place. But Deuce is he's a very fascinating figure. And Cooper could probably speak to this better than me. The ceiling is like,
where is it, Coop?
It's very high.
Come in. Where's the ceiling?
It's high, but it's, it's just in terms of, you would put him in that boomer bust category.
Oh, okay.
Ceiling's high.
You said it better than I could have.
There we go.
The floor is low. And he's talented. We know that he's been a very talented, gifted athlete for a very long time. And he made one start this year, and you could see it all kind of bubble up. And it was against Mercer, right? So you have to take that with a grain of salt. But, this was a guy that ran for 170 yards. I think accounted for 6 touchdowns in that game. And you see a little bit of it. And I think he needs to continue to develop as a passer. It's less about the arm talent, and it's more about those intangible things that I talked about with Drew Messamaker, just in terms of the shot clock, seeing it, trusting it, playing with anticipation, being decisive. Those are all areas of his game where he needs reps. So I think that's really important for him. And obviously, transferring out of Auburn, I would imagine that Auburn's going to go with Byron Brown from South Florida. That would be my guess, coming over with Alex Golish. So Deuce Knight's going to go hunt snaps somewhere. So where would that be? Boston College, to me, I understand the Kenyatta Jackson fit. It's a little wonky, right? Just from the standpoint of what we're talking about with Dylan Raiola and the talent around him. If that's going to be an issue for another top flight quarterback. And for Ole Miss, the only question that I would have for the Rebels is, You're in the semifinals of the college football playoff, right? We all know everything that has transpired over the last month in Oxford. The expectations for that program following the deepest run that they have ever had in their program's history. Does a guy that is that gifted, is he able to deliver them to a double-digit win season while he's developing, right? And we thought the world of Austin Simmons just based off of what we saw in a very small sample size. And through 2.5 games, I believe, this year, it was kind of a rocky start before Trinidad Chambers came in. A guy with a ton of experience, even though it was D2, came in, was able to really kind of maximize Ole Miss's offense. So that's the thing. It's more like the timeline thing is really kind of important. And for Deuce, what I would say is, like, I like the idea of the Ole Miss fit. I don't hate the idea of him going into a situation like we talked about with DJ Lagway. Potentially, it's a little bit low pressure, and they just build around you, right? And as you see him develop, the program grows with you, which is kind of what we saw with Sam Leavitt at Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham. When they went to the Big 12 championship, nobody expected that, right? But it was behind a young guy that played to his ability a lot sooner than people thought. So fit with quarterbacks, that's a really big thing. And obviously that'd be a good situation for him at Ole Miss. It's just interesting because Austin Simmons is still a very talented kid.
And it's still there. He is not in the transfer portal as of day one of this portal window opening. While we're on the subject of fit and Auburn quarterbacks, Byron Brown from USF, early crystal ball, Chris, right, to follow his head coach to Auburn. Is there any other schools in the mix, or does it feel like this is the new Tigers QB?
I would be very surprised if it was anybody but Byron Brown. And so would the Auburn quarterback room, if you look at all the people who've left it.
Yeah, I think they can read the tea leaves as well.
Yes, so it's going to be Byron Brown there, barring an absolute shock. He's a guy, I mean, for a new staff, I think it's important to have continuity is important, like, obviously, but like experience in year one really helps. And Byron Brown gives you the best of both worlds. He's the perfect bridge quarterback. You get him for 1 year. He has upside. I mean, some scouts, I think, could see him like potentially developing into that guy if he kind of develops a little bit more as a passer in terms of being a draft pick. And he's a perfect fit for that system. Does it really well. Helps you out in the run game. Frankly, he can help mitigate some of the losses with his legs that you have by losing people like Cam Coleman out there in the world or an Eric Singleton. So he's a guy that makes a ton of sense for Alex Golesh and his staff year one. And I think it's going to be a very easy fit for Auburn. And then the next step is figuring out what happens behind him in the quarterback room, because there's almost nobody left there. Let's start with Byron Brown. 92 career touchdowns. Guys played a lot of football, played a lot of good football. What can Auburn fans get excited about?
What Chris said, right? I think the offensive line was an issue for Jackson Arnold last year, and obviously Jackson Arnold didn't live up to the billing of what a lot of people thought.
He too is in the transfer portal.
He too is in the transfer portal, but Byron Brown is a guy that I think the most important piece of what he brings to Auburn is the continuity with his head coach. Not only that, but the dual threat athletic ability as a runner. And when you don't have the offensive line, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, offensive linemen are very, very difficult to come by in this specific transfer market. I mean, when you talk about tackles, when you talk about interior offensive linemen, those are tough, right? And teams like Oregon are going to be in that market. Teams like LSU are going to have to replace 4 starters potentially on the offensive line. So that's going to be really, really competitive. So when you have a quarterback that can create and play make, that's a really good thing. And then obviously has a very intricate understanding of the offense. The piece about him that I find I'm a little curious about in terms of like when you're evaluating the prospect is like, can he reach that next step as a passer, just in terms of consistency? And I think the pushback on that would be, hey, this guy is the only guy since Jaden Daniels that has passed for over 3,000 yards and rushed for over 750.
Heisman Trophy winner.
Twice.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that's really good, regardless of the level of competition that he's playing. So, yeah, I like the fit, but these decisions ultimately at the end of the day are what head coaches get judged by. Like, I don't think we're talking about this enough. Like, tonight stays in conference, goes to Ole Miss, ends up being the guy that we think he can be. There are going to be a lot of questions for Alex Golesh, who's in his first year, and Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Malcolm Simmons, Malik Blockton, Robert Woodyard, Amaris Williams, they're all out the door. Jay Crawford, they're all gone. right? So we saw Hugh Freeze never get off to the start that people thought Auburn was capable of getting off to. And if you're goalish, like, I think it's really important that they get off to an 8-9 win start and they show some promise here. So if Byron Brown can't deliver that, that could be a little bit of an issue long term.
There are also some quarterbacks who have announced that they're sticking around. Kansas State quarterback Avery Johnson, somebody that comes to mind. You've got Lenora Sellers at South Carolina, and so there's been those fun. I am recommitting to this school or re-signing or all these fun things that definitely have some. Looks like the NFL a little bit when it comes to that.
Yeah, man, USC's got a graphic for everybody, man.
They are setting the standard as far as this quarterback, and their quarterback Jaden Mayava is coming back as well. So let's. Okay, so they're talking to me in my ear right now, which means there's some things that are happening right now.
Oh.
How about Jaden Mangum from Michigan entering the portal, the defensive back? Just real quick, something on him. Is that a poll?
That's the thing. No, I mean, there's how many players are jumping in right now, and it's like, hey, how about this?
Also,
kid?
we've got Kobe Salton. No, there's so many guys that are just entering constantly.
Kenny, our producer, I love you. I'm going to have to watch him a little bit later. Not the first guy on my list, but Michigan on that point. Michigan, I think it's a
we're
good
seeing some guys
talking point.
Jump off.
It's interesting to me though. Like, the thing that's really kind of stuck with me is Michigan, Penn State, and they both had a little attrition. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Hasn't really been anything major outside of Penn State. Kind of had some guys trickle today, Grunkemeyer and the defensive tackle.
They've got 13 outgoing,
right,
13 going from Michigan at this point.
But it hasn't been anything like we saw with Matt Campbell and Iowa State.
No.
Right.
Iowa State's got a much larger number.
And I'm saying that to say, like, Michigan to me and Penn State to me, and I know Penn State has suffered some blows here over the last 24 hours. It just feels like there's more connectivity to the brand for the players that are already on campus there than there is the coach, versus a place like Iowa State, where the identity of that program, right, wrong, or indifferent, was Matt Campbell. And you got to give him a lot of credit for what he built up Iowa State to be. And Iowa State, less than 20 scholarship players, I believe, right now, currently on the roster. So
49 outgoing transfers
that's
right
crazy.
Now for Iowa State. Of course, the big one, Rocco Becht, one of the most productive quarterbacks in all of college football, likely following his head coach, Matt Campbell, to Penn State. But guys, I'm sick of talking about quarterbacks because there's a lot of other great prospects. The highest ranked non-QB in there.
For like another 20.
We could go. Would you, real quick, would you call it like a really deep class for quarterbacks, or just a lot?
I would say obviously the top end talent from last year is very different, in terms of projectability and production. That
before the spring, it felt like John Mateer or bust, and then we got Nico.
It was Mateer and Beck. And those were kind of the two guys, and they did right by us. Both made the playoffs, right? And
thanks,
Nico had a very, very up and down season at UCLA, but so did everybody else. So I think this class were like Levitt, Sorsby, Mestamaker. It's early, especially on Mestamaker, but like those are three guys that have very compelling cases that if they can play up to close to their ceiling, those guys are all more than likely first round type of talents, right? So it's a year that I think is very fascinating. Then you have Lagway, Raiola, who we both talked about, guys that are bouncing back from different experiences, right? Like
the former 5 stars. So names, that will change a program right or wrong.
Every one of these guys has a unique story that makes it kind of cool to watch. Like Levitt's this guy that's electric and he's fun, and they overachieved at Arizona State. This year, the injury, obviously the information on him that we've received has kind of been a little bit checkered. Sorsby started 7-1. They lost their last 4. He's an extremely talented kid. Mestamaker's coming from the group of 5, where he started his first year. Lagway and Raiola were the 2 highest ranked quarterbacks, and they haven't lived up to the billing yet, right? So you're just trying to figure out, like, can they get to where we think they can be? And what does that look like, or not? Or are they trending in the wrong direction?
All right, let's talk about some non-QBs. The highest ranked non-QB is former Auburn wide receiver Cam Coleman. So let's go to our Texas insider over there. What are you hearing, Chris, as far as the Longhorns' interest in him, and I guess the whole country's interest in Cam Coleman?
Yeah, I don't think it's just the Longhorns that are interested in Cam Coleman, to be honest. But I do think Texas has a very good chance to get Cam Coleman. And I'm not saying they're the only ones. A&M's in the mix, and quite a few other teams are. But if I'm going to narrow the group, Texas would obviously be there. And Texas is a team, frankly, that I think some people around Auburn, like even a month or two ago, thought like if Cam Coleman left, that Texas would make a lot of sense. And Texas is certainly interested. Who wouldn't be, right? He's one of the 5 most talented receivers in the country. A&M is another team I'm watching closely. His former wide receiver coach, or at least the coach who recruited him out of high school when he was initially committed to Texas A&M, is there. It's Alabama's come up with Cam Coleman. Like, people have speculated that Ohio State might be interested. I have not heard that, but there's just a lot of these teams. LSU has come up as well. But the 2 teams that have come up most consistently are in the Lone Star State. It's Texas and Texas A&M. And I have heard 2 things with Cam Coleman. 1, that most likely is going to stay in the Southeastern footprint. And 2, elite quarterback play is important to him. Auburn was up and down this year, obviously, with Jackson Arnold as the starter. And this is his money year in terms of the NFL draft. And I think getting the right quarterback and the right fit for him is very critical for Cam Coleman going into this cycle.
Speaking of Texas, how about defensive end Jaden Woods? What do you think about that potential?
I love him. I'm a big Jaden Woods guy.
He's visiting Texas today. I should probably.
Yeah, I saw that. And this is a guy that I think for Will Muschamp would be absolutely huge, just in terms of the freshman year that he had at Florida and the way that he could impact the game. I went back and forth. I thought, comparing him and Chaz Coleman, they're very 2 different guys. Chaz Coleman in the transfer portal from Penn State. Both guys had terrific freshman years, but Jaden Woods more battle-tested in the SEC. Maybe not quite the athlete, which is crazy to say because he is a very, very good athlete. Maybe not the elite level bend and flexibility of a guy like Chaz Coleman, but Jaden Woods, just in terms of like the lead in his hands and the ability to move opposing offensive tackles as a true freshman. He is very strong. He's quick. He is sudden, and he's very instinctual as well. See the play that he made against Ole Miss when he's dropping in coverage and kind of catches everybody by surprise, including Trinidad Chambliss, and makes an unbelievable interception. That just goes to show the type of athleticism that he has. But like for Texas, this is what I like, right? You got Arch Manning for 1 more year. You got Colin Simmons for 1 more year. This is it. This is the window, right? So they have circled this to go out and potentially get a guy like Jaden Woods or potentially get a guy like Cam Coleman to pair with a guy like Ryan Wingo. You don't want to look back on a guy that could be the potential number 1 pick draft, and there's a long way to go with Arch Manning, and say we didn't do everything in our power to put all the pieces around him to go make one final last push and run. And I thought they dropped the ball this year. I don't think they did a good enough job. I thought they were kind of sloppy, quite honestly, just in terms of the way that they surrounded Arch Manning and what that looked like. And a lot of that is growing pains on him and a lot of stuff that he has to take accountability for. But this is a roster that finished this season strong. They have enough talent, but you got to do what you got to do. And then obviously Texas right now, if you're in on Jaden Woods and Cam Coleman, they are prepared to drop a lot of bags here. You
did tweet major bag alert.
Yes, major bag alert. Major bag alert.
What were we going to add?
I'm just going to say Texas is, I think Cooper brought this up with the window with Arch. Like, I think there's an awareness that the Arch Manning window could end next year. And like, this is the chance. They kind of missed it with Quinn. Like, they made it to the semifinals twice. With Arch Manning, they came up short this year, and they're swinging big. Like Cam Coleman, Jaden Woods. We haven't mentioned him, but Isaac Brown coming from Louisville is a guy I'm watching closely. Cooper, where do you have him? Like number 1, 2, 3 running back in the portal?
He is my number 1 running back in the portal.
There we go. Number 1 running back, like number 2 edge, number 1 receiver. Like Texas is making the swings. They're going to address the offensive line. They're going to go high profile linebacker. They're in it with several DBs as well. Like Texas is being very aggressive this cycle at the top in a way we didn't necessarily see last year. And you're seeing players leave Texas, good ones. There are several players that have left Texas that are going to be high-profile players in the portal, but Texas is being very aggressive this cycle to make sure they build the right roster around Arch Manning.
It probably has something a little to do with the fact that both A&M and Texas Tech made the playoffs.
How'd that feel?
Probably not great, right?
No. Also, North Texas was very close to. I was thinking about that with all the potential Texas connections outside of actual Texas.
Can I give a shout out to North Texas?
I told you we were going to be talking about them a lot today. Not for good reasons, unfortunately.
But here's a good reason, and maybe it's more about Oklahoma State and Eric Morris and the front office that is going to Stillwater with them. I was so impressed with North Texas. And the reason why I'm impressed is because I got to grade all the guys, unfortunately, from North Texas that are in the portal. But just how talented this group was, from Drew Mestemacher to Caleb Hawkins to Wyatt Young, the receiver, to a handful of other guys on both sides of the line of scrimmage, defensive backfield, running back room as well. Patrick Cobb deserves a ton of credit, the running back coach over there. He had 3 guys that are legitimate Power 4 options. North Texas, to be able to assemble a team with that type of individual talent, and then obviously you see why they had the type of success that they had this year. That's very difficult to do in this day and age, just to out-scout people that well. And now all the Power 4 teams benefit off of their hard work, right? But North Texas and Iowa State, and Iowa State, Penn State's getting ready to be Iowa State North is what you said, right?
Iowa State North.
And Iowa State North. And Iowa State is one of those teams, like from a developmental standpoint and the traits that they attracted there to Iowa State. Iowa State's not the easiest place to recruit to, especially in the NIL era. So to me, my first thought was, if I'm a Penn State fan, if I was wearing my Penn State hat and I was going through the watching all these state players, I'd be excited.
Yeah, some guys that can come in and do damage immediately as well, because we know the expectations at Penn State. As we get close to the top of the hour, just want to remind you to hit that like button if you've not already. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Tell all your friends we're talking all things portal here, and I'll do something for you and answer some questions. I can't even attribute this to one person, because we're getting a lot of talk about Jaden Baugh, the running back from Florida. Will he, won't he kind of enter the transfer portal? Our Matt Zenitz reporting that John Summerall, another assistant coach, were going to travel to meet with him to try and convince him to stay. Why is he worth that? I guess, why is it important for Florida to hang on to this running back?
I think he would probably be right up there, if not the main primary option as the number one portal back available if you were to jump in. And this is a guy that's just he's battle tested through his first 2 years at Florida. And if you know anything about his story, a lot of people thought he was going to be a linebacker. Glenn Schumann at Georgia, the defense coordinator over there, thought he was going to be a linebacker, then had to face him. But his vision, his patience, and I would say his contact balance, and he's just a tough guy that was born to play in the SEC. Big Ten backs, SEC backs have a different feel to him. This guy, just the way that he plays, his 3-down value and what he brings to the table, it's very, very high, and it's very, very respected in the league. It's one of those guys that you talk about that I think a lot of people in the league, the SEC, their ears kind of perk up, right? Because they know that guy, and that's the type of guy that they have to face on Saturday, that they have to game plan for. So a very impressive prospect that I think brings an immediate value to a team that believes they're just one piece away from winning a national championship or contending deeply in the college football playoffs.
Will he become available? What's the latest there?
I mean, I know it's not a fun answer, but it's up in the air. I had 2 conversations about Jaden Baugh yesterday. Nothing, at least as of those conversations, has been decided. Florida's still actively trying to keep him. He's a top priority for them, like obviously so. He's a guy, especially with the way Buster Faulkner runs the ball, the new offensive coordinator there, like that is a guy that could be the centerpiece of your offense. And somebody, like, frankly, like we didn't talk about it earlier, but Aaron Philo coming over from Georgia Tech doesn't have a ton of starting experience. You can lean on Jaden Baugh as the centerpiece of your offense. But yeah, I mean, teams are pushing. Teams would be very interested in Jaden Baugh. I can think of a number of SEC schools that would be very happy to add him to the roster next year, and a couple outside of the SEC footprint as well that would take a swing. So Florida's doing its darndest, sorry, Mom, to keep them.
They are. That was a good way of describing it.
Yeah, well, I saved it. I was about to go there, but the darndest to keep them, but we'll see. Yeah. Like, it's just, there's a reason why people have been speculating about Jaden Baugh behind the scenes for about 2 months now.
Because there's no tampering happening whatsoever.
None.
But this is what happens when you do have staff changes. It becomes a situation where your roster is kind of up for grabs at that point in terms of perception-wise. But Florida is one of those schools, like we mentioned, like a Michigan, that might not see as many losses just for that brand power and maybe some of the excitement of a John Summerall coming in. Speaking of things that people are asking about in the chat, I'm seeing Coy Parrich's name a lot, and he is such an interesting prospect because there was that excitement, right? Coming out of Michigan, he's one of the top safeties in his class. I believe that you guys had him at number 5 in that in his high school class, but he plays 2 ways. Is that something that will continue potentially with the next school. How did he do with that last year?
I think he did okay. And I'm still in the kind of like early part of the evaluation process with him because I know the type of athlete that he is.
Is that somebody that you really have to dig in on because you're wondering kind of what happened since what we've seen from high school?
Yeah, safety's I wouldn't say difficult, but it's an intricate position to kind of evaluate, right? Just in terms of the exposure that you have to him. But the athlete is a first-round caliber athlete, and we have known that all the way back since he played at the Navy All-American Bowl. And I have to give Andrew Ivins a shout-out, our director of the scouting. He was the MVP. And, Drew calls him Koi Pond, right? And this kid was electric. I mean, dynamic in the return game. Minnesota, I think, obviously wanted to get him involved offensively. And I think as the year kind of wore on, it became more just relatively known, like, hey, that was going to be difficult to do. Yeah. Not everybody's Travis Hunter, and that's not a knock, right? But in terms of the athletic gifts, the speed, the athleticism, the way that he plays with so much range, that's a guy that's a really impressive guy. Right now we have him as a 96, right? So that's really kind of outside that first round caliber prospect. And he is, like, he's got all the athletic traits. I think for him, it's about taking the next step, both in coverage in terms of the consistency as a tackler as well. He missed a lot of tackles this year that you would expect for not only that caliber athlete, but like he's a physically imposing type of player that were not up to his standards. So I think for him, the language that we've seen, it's been like he's going to go test the market, and that's smart because he's going to like what the market has to say, right? And then it's going to come back to Minnesota, and do they have a good game plan for him? But he was between Minnesota and Ohio State coming out. So I would imagine Ohio State will more than likely be involved there. And this is going to be a guy that's going to have every opportunity he wants to go play wherever he wants. And the other part of that is not just because of the player that he represents. Safeties are very, very difficult to come by. They're tough and they're expensive, right? So when you got a good one, you got to take care of them.
Ohio State with a need as well, with Caleb Downs going off to the NFL, a guy that will be a first-round draft pick. Chris, you hear Coop kind of talking about there's going to be a market for him, and Ohio State could, if we're drawing tea leaves back from his high school days, what are you hearing as far as the interest in Koi Perich?
I mean, it's a smart tea leaves to look at, right? Yeah. Like, he's very close to going to Ohio State out of high school. It's obviously a need. Ohio State has been in the safety market behind the scenes on my end, and I certainly have had them linked heavily to Koi Perich since he went in. Another school I would maybe at least keep an eye on is Miami. Corey Heatherman was his defensive coordinator last year when Koi was one of the best freshmen in America and really was one of the best safeties in America. And Miami is not afraid to swing big in the portal, as we know. So those are two I'm watching. I think maybe Minnesota, as Cooper mentioned, could be a possibility. That's home for him. There's a reason why he picked the school in the first place, depending on what the market looks like. But at least early on, and other teams are going to swing, I'm keeping an eye on Ohio State and Miami. So
just to clarify, he is in the portal, Koi Perich, but could go back to Minnesota if he decides?
Let me confirm that.
Okay, we'll let you crunch the numbers here a little bit. But there's another player that is coming up a lot in the chat right now, and that's Alabama wide receiver Jalen Mbakwe. I mean, anytime you see an Alabama player in there, and they got a ton of production from their wide receiver room in particular this season, so there was a chance that there could be some movement. Are you putting your hands up because you got some info for us?
Right? I was.
Okay.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, it's just interesting to note that there's a lot of Minnesota players in the portal today, and Koi Perich is not one of them. He's not one of them.
Okay.
So take that for what it is. Like, schools have 48 hours to submit a player, and maybe they're trying to get him to think about it and change his mind a little bit. That could be the case, but sometimes kids decide not to go in the portal when they announce. So something I'll be monitoring.
Yep. Or, paperwork. There's a few people entering the portal today.
Yeah, and it's January 2nd, and it's a Saturday or a Friday. Compliance, I don't know if it's on it is necessarily working today in a lot of cases.
Exactly. So all right. We'll keep an eye on that, but we appreciate you asking there in the YouTube chat. A reminder, too, we are very close to hitting 100 likes again. Nothing really happens except it makes us very happy about it. Keeps content free, all the good stuff. Let's go back to Jaden Mbakwe, though.
Nothing
happens except we get very excited. I think that's worth it, though, to bring joy to us here on Transfer Portal. Coop, Jaden Mbakwe, what do we need to know about him?
Dynamic guy coming out of high school, Clay Chalkville, Alabama. It was in my region. So obviously this one hits a little bit closer to home, evaluating him. But a guy that was a two-way player, played a lot of quarterback, and a guy that we projected as a corner. out of high school, and that's when he enrolled at Alabama. That's what he was playing, and he played quite a bit at Alabama as a true freshman. And quite honestly, I thought the snaps were impressive. They weren't there from the consistency standpoint that I think obviously he was ready to take over a starting role, maybe what we saw of a Xavier Brown or a DeJohn Lee, but certainly a guy that I thought could play on the perimeter. And I like the idea of potentially even moving him inside as a nickel. If we remember last year, Chris, you can maybe throw some clarity on this, but my speculation is that he was thinking about entering the portal. Then he changed positions at Alabama. So he went from a corner to receiver, which he played both sides. I can see the reason why Alabama would say, okay, we'll keep you here and we'll let you play receiver and we'll see how it works out. Didn't play this year, really didn't see the field outside of special teams. So it's interesting because he's an extremely gifted athlete and he was a very gifted punt returner as well. And this is a guy that I think his future is best at corner. And these are very, very important conversations for kids, you know, because I've seen it multiple times where guys they grew up and they played receiver in high school, but they're 215 pounds and they project best to running back, right? There's other guys that play quarterback and they're a dual threat, and teams tell them, okay, hey, you can come here, you can play quarterback, and then it doesn't work out, and then they're on their third school trying to play quarterback, where it's like a position change for a guy like Brashard Smith that comes over from Miami to SMU, changes his whole career, and he gets drafted late in the third round because he played running back, and he did that for a year at SMU. Mbakwe, if I was having a hard conversation with Jalen Mbakwe right now, is, hey, we're going to flip you over back to the other side of the football, and we're going to revive your career because that's where your ceiling is the highest. And you have to be open-minded to playing on the perimeter, playing nickel, playing deep safety if we have to play you there because that's where you're best. And I think that's where Mbakwe is right now. This is like he's got the fork in the road right now for his career, and he better make a good decision because there's going to be a team out there that sees, all right, he's a former 5-star, he's athletic, he can play receiver for us. They're going to throw a nice number at him, and it might be comfortable for him, but it won't be the best thing for him. It's a lot of those are the type of things and nuance that these kids are facing, and you know, hopefully they can come to the right decision for their career.
Chris, what are some early options that we're potentially hearing for Jalen Mbakwe?
I'm going to be honest. I don't know everything.
Too early?
It's too early. He entered like 2 hours ago, and it's been a crazy day. I will just say, as Cooper said there, a player like that is going to command interest. But I think a lot of it will have to do with, one, what is he willing to do? What side of the ball is he going to play? How does team see him? And also, what is he willing to admit about himself and what went wrong at Alabama? And you can take a swing at another big school like that. And he's from Alabama. I'm sure Auburn would be happy to stick him on whatever side of the ball they want to. But you have to find the best spot for you. But at this point, I don't have anything. It's too early on that one.
Gotcha. One more that keeps popping up in the chat. We mentioned Iowa State. A lot of outgoing players. 49 is what our count is. One of them, though, offensive lineman in black. Anybody have? Oh, we got an.
Yeah, I got some.
What do you think about him? Offensive line is always that position that a lot of teams need.
Yeah, 3-year starter at guard for Iowa State, and a guy that's just kind of like fits the mold of playing at Iowa State or playing at Penn State or playing anywhere in the Big Ten. And that's what he's about. He's not sexy, but he is strong. And I keep using this term because it's important. It's less about traits that you can develop over time. These teams are not worried about, hey, who's the next guy that I can get drafted in the top 100 of the NFL draft. They're only worried about, is this guy good enough for my conference, right? Can we win with this guy in my conference? And Brendan Black is one of those guys, big guy that I think works best in a power gap scheme, right? And for those out there that don't know that, that's just north-south ball, right? But he is a people mover, and that's what he's about.
It's important.
He's not the best athlete, but he's got a lot of calluses and a lot of experience, and he's a very good player.
Okay. Our guy at George Blissett 6536 wants to know who some of the top tight ends are in the portal.
A computer just died, so we're gonna have to do this off the dome.
I just reported on one of them. I don't know where Cooper has him ranked, but Bowling Green tight end Jacob Harris is
I haven't seen him yet.
taking visits to Wisconsin and South Carolina.
Okay.
So I just reported that a second ago. Help me out, Cooper, with the pronunciation here. That's Iowa State tight end. Ben Brahmer.
It might be wrong.
Brahmer is what I'm going to go with, too.
Yeah.
He's the number 1 tight end in our rankings.
Number 2 now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who's number 1?
Who's number 1?
Luke Reynolds.
Well, we can talk about both of them.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Start with Brahmer. I would be shocked if he was not a Penn State Nittany Lion. My crystal ball went in this morning. Obviously, there's a lot of familiarity with Matt Campbell. And speaking of Penn State, I would expect Luke Reynolds to end up at Virginia Tech, based on what I'm hearing.
Everyone's following their coach. Yeah.
Yes. So those are where I have those two guys right now.
Okay.
Very good players. Yeah. And I sound like a broken record, but like tight ends are one of those position groups that I think most of the public would be surprised on how much of a priority they are.
Why?
And because they're very important. They just seem like window dressing to a lot of people, right? But I'm in terms of traditional wide tight ends that can bang on the inside and add value to your running game, they're very, very important. And in terms of the, I would say, supply and demand aspect of it, those guys are hard to find, which, you know, I was talking to people in the industry on the coaching side of it. There's guys out there that are like, you know, winnable players. All right. So that would be like adequate would be the adjective that you would attach to them. Those guys are commanding north of $400,000 at second tier Power 4 programs. It's a lot of money, right? Yeah. So guys like Luke Reynolds, guys like Brahmer that we've talked about, those are guys with middle to late day two upside and are impressive prospects. So whether they end up at Penn State or Virginia Tech, those would be huge additions for those respective programs because everybody needs those guys. They're a lot more important than people think.
Well, Cooper, you got Dorian Thomas as your number 2 tight end currently in the portal.
All right, maybe we're not updated. Dorian Thomas from New Mexico,
who is going to visit, according to Matt Zenitz, Florida, Wisconsin, UCLA, and Cal.
Yeah, really impressive kid. And another guy that's like all the two that I previously mentioned. I think what makes them really impressive is their ability not only to add value in the run game, but what they can do as pass catchers as well. And Dorian Thomas from New Mexico is really one of those interesting guys, is like an H-back that you can flex out that I think, different than the two that the aforementioned, gives you more upside as a pass catcher. He was a dynamic kid for UNM.
All right. Well, while we're talking about maybe some Group of 6 teams and players jumping up, people want to know about wide receiver Chase Hendrick from Ohio. In over 1,000 yards receiving. He was their leading wide receiver for the Bobcats. What can he do at the next level? We assume that he's trying to jump up to that P4 level.
There is a plethora of extremely talented receivers, and this kid I just love. I love his game a lot. Kind of reminded me a little bit of Brandon Cooks, who's had a long career in the NFL, and obviously played at extremely high level at Oregon State and was a first-round draft pick for the New Orleans Saints. But this kid is sudden, the initial quickness off the line of scrimmage and at the top of the route, his ability to create consistent separation, and he is tough, dependable, and you can rely on him at every part of the field. And he's got run after catch ability as well. He can create explosives vertically. He's just a really, really impressive receiver that I'm glad you brought him up, because that's a guy that we haven't really talked about that much, and I think it can be a really valuable impact player at the next level.
Chris, are you hearing anything early on Ohio wide receiver Chase Hendricks?
I am not.
No.
Sorry. I'm just trying to track down something that's being reported currently.
Okay.
Sorry.
I like it. Should we let you cook a little bit here?
I mean, I don't have it confirmed right now, but there are reports out there that Old Miss quarterback Austin Simmons is going in the portal.
Wow. Okay.
Something I've been monitoring for a couple of days.
Okay. That's definitely something that we will track. And as people are probably asking too about what happens with Trinidad Chambliss, is they're still playing. He is, just to clarify, still awaiting information from the NCAA to get a waiver for an extra year of eligibility.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So whatever happens with him, there could be some trickle-down effect as well. But as we mentioned, all roads lead back to the quarterback position. Now we just can't quit talking about the QBs. Be very interested to see. But we'll let Chris kind of chase that down a little bit. We'll talk about some team needs here, though, Cooper. While we're on the subject of Trinidad Chambliss, let's ask about LSU, because, of course, if he's able to enter the transfer portal, that's going to be a place that we're going to keep an eye on. QB need for them. We mentioned the interest in Brendan Sorsby, but how about somebody to protect the quarterback?
Yeah, they weren't very good this year. And if you remember, Brian Kelly came out in the beginning of the year. He said, I know what a good offensive line looks like. He was very wrong about that. That offensive line was putrid. And it was Tyree Adams. It was Weston Davis. It was Josh Thompson, it was Cohen Eccles, Paul Mapinga.
Mm-hmm.
They're all gone.
Yeah.
Braylon Moore, the center, is probably the only guy coming back, I believe, at this point. And this is really interesting given the expectation of a $13 million man that you just hired from Ole Miss, right? Because offensive line is very tough. Now, what Ole Miss has shown to be able to do under Lane Kiffin and now Pete Golding is really kind of use this offensive line almost kind of like as a disposable asset. These guys aren't really the premium cream of the crop, but they're bigger bodies that fit into the scheme for Ole Miss that are able to do what they need to do. These aren't the type of guys, and I'm not saying that won't change an issue, but these aren't the type of guys that you're hearing having their name called early in the NFL draft. They kind of view it more as kind of teams in the NFL view running backs, right? That's kind of the value that they put on them. It's different. It's unique that way. And trust me, I'm sure Lane Kiffin would love to develop some very talented offensive linemen there at LSU, but it's going to be fascinating how they piece together that offensive line, especially if you're going to go spend $4 million on a quarterback, right? You got to be able to protect that guy. Mm-hmm. The other thing is their offensive line, or excuse me, their receiver room is completely depleted, right? Yeah. I mean, Berrien Brown's off to the NFL. Aaron Anderson's off to the NFL. Mm-hmm. Chris Hilton is off to the NFL. Xavier Thomas is off to the NFL. Cortez Hankton, who's a receivers coach, he's off to Ohio State. So there is a lot of change happening in Baton Rouge. Receiver won't be that much of an issue. Mm-hmm. Just looking at what he was able to do at Ole Miss, I think they'll be able to replicate that. But those are two big needs.
Okay, I got to cut you off real quick because we are officially reporting that Ole Miss quarterback Austin Simmons is expected to enter the transfer portal. Before we get into what happens next with him, what happens immediately with him as his team right now, Chris, is still playing in the college football playoff? What are the mechanisms behind that? We saw a similar thing maybe last year with Bo Prabula.
Yeah, who chose to go straight to Missouri and didn't play. But we also
know what's happening here?
I don't, not at this point. We also have the Preston Stone situation where he was SMU's backup quarterback and he stayed with SMU through the playoffs. So that's up in the air. I'm still waiting for some clarification on some stuff with Austin Simmons, but we are reporting he is officially going on.
I do wonder when it's like, everything starts moving a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, you better take your spot now.
Yeah.
Like, because Bo Prabula was very vocal that he did not want to leave Penn State.
Yeah. That's the tough part about the calendar. That's why they moved this transfer portal back a little bit. But as we're seeing, that doesn't necessarily fix every problem.
And Simmons is one of those guys that he would be sandwiched in between a guy like Lagway, Raiola, and Grunkemeyer. So he'd be right in between there. Okay. Right. So like there's the cream of the crop.
The top 10 QB.
It's like the 1A, the 1B, and then you have kind of like he's kind of right there.
Okay.
So point being is there's enough quarterback needy teams out there that maybe that just kind of forced his hand where he's like, hey, I got to, this is a spot I like. Maybe I got to jump on it. Mm-hmm.
He's an interesting prospect from the standpoint too. I mean, his story is absolutely wild. I think he's already an Ole Miss graduate. So there's that kind of going into it. But despite the fact that he's already graduated from college, he's still very young in terms of what we've seen from him at the quarterback position. So how do you even go about evaluating what we've seen? Because they cut ties with him very quickly, just not necessarily because he was playing super poorly, but because Trinidad Chambliss just left you no choice.
Yeah, you lean more on less of the recent exposure and more of kind of what go all the way back to high school. I think Kenny Minchie, who's transferring from Notre Dame, would kind of fit into that box as well. Two guys that are really talented, and the more you kind of dig in behind the scenes, both at Notre Dame, both at Ole Miss, the way that those guys are wired, there's a lot of positive feedback on that, and you don't go on that, but that's a part of the process as well. And with Simmons, we've seen glimpses, not flashes, very small glimpses of a guy that's a very, very talented passer. And at times it was a rocky start to the season, but just in terms of measuring the upside with, okay, how far along does he have in his development? That's kind of where you hedge your bet a little bit. Mm-hmm. You're like, hey, I know this guy has top tier level traits in terms of what we've seen already. It looks like he could have some time before he matures into that player that we think he can be. And that's kind of where you fit on a landing spot there.
Mm-hmm. You hear anything new?
I would watch Missouri.
Watch Missouri. Yeah. Okay.
I'd watch Missouri.
Yep. Mizzou is a team that has come up quite a bit already today.
Mizzou's got some resources. You know,
money.
Yes, they're an
money.
interesting team. And Simmons is the type of guy, like, I like Matt Zollers, but I also am a big fan of creating competition at that position. And then, like, I don't know if Zollers showed you enough as a true freshman where you can sit back coming off a disappointing 8-4 season and Eli Drinkwitz and not bring in another guy that you think, you know, can emerge.
He will stay with Ole Miss throughout the college football playoff, by the way. Just got that word in. So he'll continue to be Trinidad Chambliss' backup quarterback around playoffs.
Okay, good to know. See, we asked and answered.
Yeah.
All right, so to recap, Austin Simmons, the Ole Miss quarterback, is set to enter the transfer portal. He will stick with them through the college football playoff. Mizzou is an early team to look at. While we're talking about team needs and we're talking about Missouri, at the quarterback position, do they need a guy to come in and start immediately, or what kind of player are they looking for? As you mentioned, they still have Zollers there.
Yeah, I think they're at the point where Eli Drinkwitz has been not a victim of his own success that he's created there, but people expect more out of Missouri than the season that they had with arguably maybe the best roster that he had in Columbia this past season. So, like I said, disappointing ending to the season there at Mizzou, but it's like, it's the Deuce Knight conversation. Like, does this guy meet our timeline, or is there another guy out there that we think can come in and help us kind of reach our goal of what we think we can be, which is a 10-win team in the SEC?
Yeah.
And I think Austin Simmons fits that bill beautifully. And if you bring him in and Matt Zollers beats him out and shows that he's a guy, great. And we saw this with Tulane. John Summerall brought in multiple quarterbacks. And outside of that, I really haven't seen that done anywhere else. But he brought in, you know, Retzlaff, the kid from Ball State as well. And he's done this for multiple years. He had it with Ty Simpson. He had it with Darian Mensah. And at the end of the day, it's like, all right, let's see what we got, right? And not everybody can do that. But, like, if you're looking at it for Mizzou, you'd have two really talented quarterbacks, and you got to see, all right, who's going to win out here between the two.
While we're talking quarterback needy Tigers, Clemson is a school that will be in the market for a quarterback, but a lot of other positions. You're shaking your head. This is a team that's got some work to do in the portal.
I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what it's going to look like. We'll see who they hire at offensive coordinator. Cade Klubnik's there. I think part of the reason that Garrett Riley's gone is because there's no clear succession plan. Whether that guy was going to be Vizina or something else, the quarterback development, the quarterback recruiting, quite honestly, was subpar and it was lazy. So now you look at Clemson. Peter Woods is gone. Tamarian Parker is gone. You know, you think about, there's one more that I'm missing. Avian Terrell's gone, right? Those are a lot of pieces, right? And there's some guys there that are on that team that, you know, heard some stuff about that. Hey, you got to watch out for. So, and you watch them they don't feel like the same team. Like, from a talent, athleticism standpoint, they don't feel as fast. They don't feel as athletic. Obviously, this season was disappointing, so it's easy for me to say that. But they have a lot of work to do for a program that has slipped in high school recruiting and then has shown really no willingness to engage in the portal. So all that means is that Dabo Swinney is on an absolute collision course for what could be a fate that he could meet sooner than later.
I was going to say, there does seem to be at least somewhat of an awareness of that with the portal. I mean, I'm going through my timeline real quick to find the information, but I tweeted last night and reported last is going to host a defensive tackle. Clemson's come up with for several portal prospects so far this cycle. And I've heard through the grapevine, Clemson is at least exploring quarterbacks in the portal. They've been communicating that with agents.
It's like,
does that feel like the bare minimum?
Yeah, we're past that, dude. Like, I don't. What are you doing? What do you mean you're exploring? You know, you need to be right up there with Texas Tech and Oregon and LSU. Like, that's how we perceive you. That's how the world perceives you in college football, as a national championship contender. That's where most people believe that you should live. So the fact that you're exploring options, maybe they go pull a rabbit out of their hat. Maybe they go get one of those guys. But, like, you're not attached to DJ Lagway. That's a guy that, quite honestly, like, fits Dabo Swinney in terms of what he wants from an intangible standpoint. You're not attached to Josh Hoover. That's a guy that fits as well. Like, where is the mouth foaming aggression to, like, we got to have it? And they don't have that. They don't have the, it's like, what are you doing?
Yes, especially coming off a season where they had just 7 wins, which was the fewest since Dabo Swinney's second season back in 2010. That was a long time ago. So some of the schools, to recap, that we've mentioned that we would consider having a lot of work to do in the portal. We just talked about Clemson. We've talked about teams that have lost their head coach or had transitions at head coach with Iowa State, North Texas, just the G6 in general, kind of being picked apart. But Chris, is there a school for you that you think has a lot of work to do in the portal, or maybe is just coming up quite a bit when these prospects hit the portal?
I think you can go a lot of directions with this. But the school I kind of think about immediately in terms of the teams that didn't have coaching changes, or I guess even the teams that did, is LSU. Cooper mentioned it earlier with the offensive line. They have to replace like the entire thing, quarterback, and receivers.
But according to you, that's a good thing. They need to replace.
Well, receiver, they just
offensive line.
Offensive line was a group that obviously did not meet the standard. They couldn't run the football. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but certainly the talent was not up to snuff, and neither was the player development, and that's why somebody new was coming in. Receiver was, we don't need to go down this rabbit hole, but there are multiple guys in that room that are going to have NFL careers. So I don't put that as much on the individual talent as in terms of the quarterback situation. Obviously was not what we thought it would be going into the season.
What else with LSU? Sorry.
Oh, I mean, they're going to have to revamp the secondary as well, losing as many pieces as they are. That defensive line wasn't as good as they wanted this year. There's a lot of work for LSU to do. And I feel like we mentioned them a lot in the context of Penn State, but Iowa State has more work to do than anybody in the country in terms of their roster. That's just kind of the reality of where they are. It's unfortunate with all the losses they've had. And a lot of those guys are loyal to Matt Campbell, as Cooper was saying earlier. And like, it's going to be a very difficult rebuilding process at a place that isn't necessarily always a top option for kids coming out of high school or the portal. It's a place traditionally that struggled without Matt Campbell. And I think they've had 45 plus players in the portal so far for Iowa State.
49 is what our count says right now.
Okay. So a lot of guys in the portal and like a lot of important positions and a lot of like critical pieces on your roster. And maybe they go raid Washington State's roster and that's how this works. And I think you will see some of that, but that's a difficult transition for that new staff.
So are you hearing them connected to available players right now? Or are you seeing that work being done?
Yeah, Iowa State comes up with a lot of schools, or with a lot of players, but I think they're also still trying to retain and they're still trying to kind of figure out the direction they're going with that roster, figuring out the staff. Like the whole staff hasn't been hired too. So yeah, they have to be very active just by the nature of the business.
I think the other thing with Iowa State and Penn State that we haven't hit on is Matt Campbell was hired after signing day.
Yep.
So it wasn't like Jimmy Rogers gets to come in and sign a couple late guys that he gets to develop, or had guys at Washington State in the backlog that he could say, all right, hey, flip over here. It's a better opportunity for you. It doesn't exist. So now that all these guys are gone in the portal, the total, like, you have to reinvent yourself. There is no, I don't say this to sound overly negative. It's just the reality. Like, what was Iowa State in that program because of the players and Matt Campbell does not exist anymore. And you have a completely blank slate. And I think it will be one of the biggest rebuilds in college football.
Are there any surprise schools, Chris? You're kind of going down this path and then pivoted to LSU that maybe didn't have a coaching change, but we're seeing lose quite a bit of prospects early on?
What's come up? I feel like Tennessee's just lost a lot of guys recently that they didn't necessarily want to. Like, some of them I think they wanted to lose, and some of them are contract negotiations. There's been a lot of Tennessee recently, kind of in a surprising way for me, given the resources
Lance
they have.
Hurd, former 5-star prospect offensive lineman.
Ricky Gibson is somebody that I don't think they wanted to lose. He didn't play a lot this year because of injury, but like, he's a really quality player. So Tennessee's been making some tough decisions. Virginia's had a couple guys going today that kind of surprised me as well. Key critical pieces of their defense. But it's also that time of year in college football. Everybody's going to lose a player or two they don't want to. So it's a very interesting cycle in that way. But at least as of today, Tennessee and Virginia are the two that are front of mind with that. Cooper, does anybody come to mind for you?
No, not really. I don't know if it's because I'm brain dead or what. But
computer's dead.
Yeah, I mean, everything's just not working right now. Tennessee is one of those schools when you bring them up, I'm like, what are they doing at quarterback? right? Joey Aguilar is not coming back. Faison Brandon, obviously one of the top players in the country. Are you going to put all that on his shoulders, especially a year where it was tough, right? Nico ends up going into the portal. I think the expectations for the year were a little bit managed, but still some disappointment. You could probably speak to that. I just wonder, like, how do you attack this year? Because this is a team that has recruited high school very well. And even last year, like, I like what they did in the portal. Sam Pendleton was a guy that I liked. Star Thomas was a guy that I liked. Colton Hood is probably going to be a top 50 draft pick. So they've done some good things, but I wonder, like, how all of a sudden they've taken a minor step back.
Yeah.
How do you get back into the mix? Because so far right now, at least at this point, I haven't really heard them connect it with some of the top names yet. And obviously that can change and it's very early, but kind of fascinated to see where they go, especially at quarterback.
I think Tennessee's making some pushes at places like safety. Like, I know they really love, like, Qual Moss, for example, from Kansas State, who is a popular guy for SEC schools. And I'm also very interested in Tennessee's quarterback situation. They don't come up as necessarily the team for a lot of these top guys, or really many at all. But I think quietly, if Tennessee found the right fit, they'd be willing to explore that.
Yeah, and there were reports too. I know last season, losing Nico Iamaleava so late in the cycle, they looked into a Josh Hoover. That could be somebody that they come back around. Obviously, Sam Levitt is somebody that everybody wanted a piece of last year and will want a piece of this year. But there has been turnover at the defensive coordinator position, a lot of staff members as well, too. So that could be kind of just the natural transition of things. But a lot of times, yes, you do see, kind of have to follow those threads in terms of why is this happening when it's not as obvious as okay, Matt Campbell goes to Penn State, right. And clearly there's going to be some attrition at Iowa State. Michigan is another one of those schools that we're not seeing a ton early on in this cycle, but because it happened after National Signing Day, that's something that you kind of have to keep in mind too with that transition. But another school that there's no coaching transition necessarily, but it was one of those many schools that we saw have to come out with a statement from their athletic director and say, nope, he's sticking around, which isn't always the greatest of signs when you have to say that you're not firing your head coach. But Florida State, they're a team that's always very active in the portal. They had to give the vote of confidence for Mike Norvell. What does Florida State need to do this portal cycle to fill some of those holes, Coop?
They got to hit a home run at every spot. I mean, there's no margin of error for Mike Norvell and his staff there. And that's very difficult to do just from, I think, the budgetary standpoint. It's like, how much support do you actually have when you feel like a lame duck right now, quite honestly, with Mike Norvell? A lot of people obviously.
That's a tough pitch, right?
Yeah,
I mean, what is his pitch?
Well, everybody knows that.
Come save my job.
Right? It's not, I mean, it's the players too.
Yeah.
Right? So, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, to go to Florida State, they probably have to pay over market value at some of these guys.
It's interesting with Florida State. That has definitely been a point of concern talking to some agents about Florida State, because if you send your player there, there's a risk that if it goes bad after 4 or 5 weeks, like, you have a lost season because your head coach is gone. And I think there's an awareness of that. Like,
and we've seen Florida State too spiral as well in the last 2 years. When it doesn't go right, it doesn't get.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. I think Mike Norvell's had 7 or 8 losing streaks of 3+ games in his career at Florida State, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It can spiral. And I think there's an awareness out there that if you go to Florida State and the season goes wrong, that things can be very difficult. But at the same time, Florida State's a program with a lot of resources. Florida State's a program that's going to spend to get where they need to go. And like, they saved a lot of money by not buying out Mike Norvell this year. You might as well put it on the roster, right? And I think Florida State is being aggressive in spots. I keep a team needs list of what teams need going in every cycle, and Florida State's got a lot of X's next to it in terms of needs. On offense, QB, running back, offensive line. On defense, the entire secondary, linebacker, edge. Like, I'm sure they would take a DT or two. Like, this is a team with a lot of work to do, which was quite obvious looking at on tape last year. And it's going to be interesting to see how they land the boat at quarterback, but also how they fill holes at other positions with some value.
mentioned the potential for some of these schools having to overspend based on, what they're bringing in and kind of the perception around the team and the head coach. But if we're looking at position by position, I want to know just straight up how much these positions cost. And again, it's going to change based on how needy you are, or, maybe if you're a big name program who's still playing college football right now, you don't have to pay as much because you have that development into the NFL, all of these things. So, Chris, I'll ask you, because you're the one that's asking all of these questions to these agents and to these players and teams and all of it. How much do specific positions cost? And I guess we'll start with the quarterback position.
Quarterback position. Nobody cares about quarterback. It's crazy. Well, John Talty and I, my colleague at CBS, surveyed dozens of people for a story we did last week about how much positions cost in the portal. And quarterback is the one with the widest range. It's very interesting. Like a high-end quarterback, $3.5+ million in this cycle. Like you're going to see quarterbacks touching the numbers. That's just the reality.
Is that more than what we saw last cycle, or about the same?
It is. Darian Mensah was the highest paid player last cycle, going to Duke. He got $4 million. But generally, even the top-end quarterbacks last cycle, like the Carson Becks, the John Mateers, jumped right over 3 and kind of sat there, and it feels like that number is up. But I think really where the number's up is kind of those average P4 starters. To get a guy with like experience and snaps, you're paying 1.5 to 2.5 in the portal, and on the low end for some of the starters with maybe not a lot of experience, they're $750 to $1 million. But a guy like Kenny Minchie is going to be in that middle bucket. Like, you know what I mean? A guy like Lincoln Kindholtz is going to be in that middle bucket.
Like a 1.5.
Yeah. So like these are guys that haven't taken really any snaps in their careers. So quarterbacks are incredibly expensive, but Cooper can probably speak to this a little bit. It's like the NFL. Like you're willing to pay 15 to 20% of your cap for a quarterback because they're the most important position on the field. And you're seeing teams allot that kind of resources to the position.
Would we say the next most pricey is like an offensive line, defensive tackle? What are you seeing with the next one?
I think it depends for next most priciest. There are exceptions at every position. Mm-hmm. I would say a high-end edge rusher, high-end tackle, or a high-end receiver would be your 3 most expensive positions after that. I mean, Ken Coleman's going to be a $2 million player. I don't feel shy about saying that. Like, I had a team speculate that if Jeremiah Smith went on the open market, he'd be a $4 million player. He'd be a name your price kind of player. So those are the 3 kind of premium positions. But every position, depending on how a school values it, can be really expensive. There are running backs this cycle that are going to get over $1 million. Whether that's responsible spending at running back is a question for every GM to kind of answer. But in a market where I don't want to say players can name their price, because the point of this article was to kind of set the boundaries of what the prices look like. But there is flexibility for players because they have the ultimate leverage. There's no way to check teams when you're negotiating. They can't call each other and ask exactly what they're going to pay. So
that's a tough part too, because the clearinghouse that all of this goes through is supposed to be setting market value, but finding market value is an impossible task at this point because it's all just hearsay.
Yeah, it's hearsay. And also a lot of the dollars getting thrown around now are rev share dollars. But teams can get creative on the other side of it. I had an ACC GM tell me that, like, yeah, you can spend $4 million on a quarterback, but you just have to get creative and cobble together 17 small contracts to get to that number. And I don't know if that's like a car dealership or
because if they're doing it as part of the rev share, that's taking it out of the athletic department. So some schools might pay the same for a quarterback that they would an entire basketball team, right?
Yeah, and you are hard capped with the rev share. Most schools are contributing between $14 and $17 million in football, but anything extra on top, that like whipped cream you're throwing all over that's on the schools to fundraise and get. And that's why you're going to have rosters that are $25 to $30 million with the salary cap of 14 to 17. And if you can raise those funds for your players and you can have that money for your players, like they can get paid a lot of money.
Yeah. You have experience working in personnel departments and doing all of this. Of course, this was pre-NIL and rev share and all of that. So I'm sure it's all blowing your mind. But is anything that he's saying surprising to you? If so, what?
It's surprising. It's not. I think the numbers are kind of hard to compartmentalize at times, just in terms of how much they're kind of ballooning and some of the quality of players that you see. I'm not going to name names, but you watch these guys and then you hear the numbers that associated with them. You're like, there are a lot of conversations that Chris and I have had, and he's like, how much do you think this guy's getting? And I say what I think I would pay him.
Yeah.
and that number is 2-3x.
Yeah.
You know,
That's because Cooper's rational and the market is anything but.
the market is
Exactly.
irrational, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of brings me to like a couple years ago, it wasn't that long ago, everybody thought Miami was crazy. Everybody thought Mario Cristobal was crazy and Life Wallet and all this type of stuff, and they're not going to be able to keep up with it. And now it's like, no, you have to be like Miami or Oregon or Texas Tech or LSU or Texas to have a shot.
Yeah.
And that's just the domain. That's the standard operating procedure there. So
I mean, just look at the teams that are playing in the college football playoff semifinals. I think Chip Patterson on the Cover 3 podcast called it new money teams, you know, especially when we're talking about Miami, as you mentioned, and in Oregon. And we saw Texas Tech, of course, were eliminated, but we're part of that discussion as well of the off-season spending, and look where it got.
Well, in a way, it's cool too. I mean, let's think about Indiana.
It's anybody's game at this point. Yeah.
What they've been able to do, and I could be wrong, but it's not like their roster has been, you know, I'd be very curious to kind of see where it measures up with the other three teams left in the college football playoffs. But what they've been able to do to elevate their profile now to be able to be in the same batter's box as these other schools like Miami or Oregon, all the other ones that we mentioned, because of the way that they've maneuvered the transfer portal. And it's crazy. They've done more with less. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I'm just saying, like, from a talent composite standpoint, we're looking at 2 consecutive years of best coaching jobs in maybe college football history that Kurt Cignetti's done. And now, because Indiana is moving into a different tax bracket than everybody else with the success that they've had on the field, they're able to get into conversations that a year or even 2 years ago they wouldn't be able to sniff. So that new money thing is very real.
Well, you're seeing it, like you said, you know, 5-star quarterback enters transfer portal. His schools of interest are Miami, Oregon, Indiana. You know, you're seeing them involved, especially considering at the quarterback position what they were able to do this year with the Heisman Trophy winning.
I also think that Texas Tech's aggressiveness has paved the way for more of a market where Cody Campbell and James Blanchard and Joey McGuire have now laid the foundation and opened up the opportunity for programs like Texas Tech that have been seen as second-tier contenders, maybe even in their own conference, to say, hold on, we have an opportunity, if we have the resources to be able to spend at that level, to just take a program that's never been nationally relevant consistently and do that on a year-to-year basis. I think for sure we will see that impact maybe a couple programs at a time here over the next couple of years. Now, it's a hard thing to do, right?
Yeah, it's easier said than done. Yeah, it's not just spending money, it's spending it right.
Right, it's not impossible.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of these schools are working on at the moment, is making sure where they spend their dollars and doing it responsibly. But a position that you've specifically mentioned is one that they might overpay for just based on supply and demand is the edge position. Why do you say that? What's available?
In terms of the edge spot, let's take a look. I mean, Jaden Woods was a guy that we talked about. Chaz Coleman was a guy that we talked about as well. And then after that, it's kind of interesting.
Do you still have Chaz Coleman from Penn State above Jaden Woods?
I do. And he's honestly the biggest risk calculation for me is Chaz Coleman, for sure. Just in terms of the frame, just in terms of the amount of snaps he's played. He's only played 150 snaps. And it depends whether or not you see it as a positive or negative. But, I mean, he played predominantly quarterback in high school, which I see as a positive. And the fact that, like, this is a guy that's still figuring it out. And with a full offseason and years of development, I think, you know, is a guy that can turn into one of the better pure pass rushers in the country. But there's some interesting names. Morris Williams from Auburn. Toby, forget the last name, excuse me, from Kansas State. John Henry Daly from Utah. You know, it's guys that have projectable frames and traits that maybe don't have production. There's guys that have production that maybe don't have those high-level traits that you wonder, okay, if they're going to go to a different spot, is that going to translate at that same level? So there's guys out there that are interesting, but if you're a contender, there's no more than 10 guys, in my opinion, of what that list looks like right now. And it's, like I said, it's early. It's day one. but like teams are going to be better prepared on the positions that the market puts a premium on to play defense. So why isn't there offensive tackles? Because teams know how important that is, right? You have to keep those guys and you have to develop them. Why isn't there a lot of safeties or linebackers or edge rushers? It's like those are premium positions, right? So when you have those guys in your building, it's really important to keep those guys home.
Yeah, that's why there's just not enough available. But everybody is looking for those players, certainly. I've got an interesting question that I want you to handle here from @BigNR37. What percentage of players wind up dropping out of the portal and going back to their school? Just like a ballpark. How often do we actually see that happen?
A decent amount.
Okay.
I can probably get you a reasonably decent number from last cycle if you give me a second.
Because I think when you see players, and I'll let you go look this up, when you see these players enter the portal, I know from a fan standpoint, I go, well, he might just be testing the waters and he might be able to come back. We might find his number. But knowing how often that actually happens, if that's just kind of a pipe dream, that's what I think we want to know.
I think it happens more than you think. I'm looking at last year's numbers, and there were 373 players who withdrew from the portal at one point or another. And I think there were 4,800 players in the portal total. I'm not going to try to do math. That
feels
free,
like viewer.
Yeah.
Do that math for us.
It feels like 4 or 5% off the top of my head. Yeah.
It's not nothing.
Yeah, it's not nothing. And I actually think you might see more of that this year. I think there's a lot of leverage plays out there for players with the shortened portal window, knowing that they only have one opportunity to make more money, if that makes sense. You can't double dip like you've seen in the past with negotiations. So that's going to make players more aggressive in terms of announcing they were going in and then coming back. It already happened this cycle. Cooper, you had Jabril Rawls from Florida State ranked in your top 25 at one point this cycle. He announced yesterday he's going back to Florida State. I think he was trending towards another school in the SEC, and Florida State ponied up to keep him. I think you're going to see a lot of that this cycle, where teams fight and continue to fight when their players in the portal and eventually get them back. And we were talking about that earlier, Koi Parrish, they would be silly not to continue trying. And yeah, I think it's a pipe dream, but it's not unrealistic that it happens.
Very interesting nugget here from our Tom Loy, who works on our recruiting team and obviously has a background with Notre Dame, is that he's saying that he would be, quote, shocked if Kenny Minchey does not end up at Nebraska. He's essentially told that it's done at this point. Is that something that was a very early connection that you're seeing with your sources, as well as former Notre Dame quarterback Kenny Minchey, Nebraska?
Absolutely. We put in a crystal ball for Kenny Minchey, Nebraska, 6 a.m. this morning, I think. So
you're ready for it.
Yeah, it's a connection that's absolutely there. Kenny Minchey was considering schools like Wisconsin, Cincinnati, and a couple others during the process. But I think Nebraska narrowed in on Kenny Minchey as their guy pretty quickly and made an aggressive push to get it over the line. And we were talking about it earlier, Kenny Minchey is going to get paid a lot of money for a guy who's never really taken any significant snaps in his career. Cooper clearly has some thoughts if you look at the facial expression, but that's the risk you have to take in the portal cycle. If you believe in a guy, even if he hasn't played a lot of snaps, you have to pay up and get him. And it works out. Think about Cincinnati went after Brendan Sorsby a couple of years ago, and he eventually emerged into one of the best quarterbacks in the country after playing. He really only started 3 or 4 games for Indiana at the end of that year, but they had conviction in him and it worked out. And Nebraska and Matt Rule are banking on Kenny Minchey to be that guy. And I mean, he did almost beat out CJ Carr in fall camp this year. There are a lot of people in that building that really like him and like where he's going to be. And Nebraska's placing a big bet.
Loy said that Illinois was also a team in play for Kenny Minchey. What do you think?
I like it. No, I like it. I mean, it's interesting because when we went back and we talked about Dylan Raiola, it was about, hey, potentially that conversation around him is, do I have enough around me to succeed, right? Do we have enough around me to go and compete for a college football playoff appearance? Based off of what we were just talking about with Chris, Nebraska probably pockets $1 to $1.5 million with the departure of Dylan Raiola, and then spends $2 million on Kenny Minchey. So $1.5 million that you can put back into your roster. So there's that balance. It's the same way in the NFL where you have a quarterback on a rookie contract. That's a big advantage, right? You got a 4-year window if they can play into that, especially if you get a guy in the second round or in the later rounds that can play It gives you more flexibility to spend on the rest of the roster. And a team like Nebraska, where, you know, it could be a challenging climate for them to get back to where they believe they should be in terms of the high school recruiting. Part of that comes from on-field success. Big part of that does, if that makes sense, right? Like, you have to prove to people that you're back in contention. So a guy like Kenny Minchey, who has the upside and is a guy that you want to bet on, and yes, it's definitely risk averse, but at the same time, you allow for more resources to be put back into your roster. And I think that's probably the optimistic way of what Nebraska is looking at.
And that's a very reasonable way to look at it, especially
Very rational.
From your perspective. Yes, but I think I would maybe push back and say that NFL fans maybe are more accustomed to seeing that in terms of, all right, this is what overthecap.com says. We got to save some money here. We'll boost up for the draft, whatever. But college football fans, will they look at that and be like, all right, we're saving some money on Kenny Minchey, or they're just going to say, we want to win football games?
No, I think it's more about understanding the logic, right?
But can he win you those football games? Is this an upgrade over Dylan Raiola?
That remains to be seen. And that's the gamble that they play. But yeah, I mean, I think it's for Nebraska, for Virginia Tech, for some of these programs, like, they have to play the game a little bit different. Right? Because not everybody has the bankroll of the teams that we've been talking about throughout this entire show, and they can pick their spots and be aggressive where they want. But it's got to be a combination of smart spending combined with really good scouting. And Kenny Minchey is a guy that it would not shock me. Maybe I'll get clipped for this, whatever. But like, if he plays to his potential, maybe we live in a world where the difference between Kenny Minchey and Dylan Raiola is not as much as the $1.5 million may make it out to be, right? And even if it is, you still get positive value in that you're able to spend around them.
Yeah.
And I think for $1.5 million and go like big deal because we get used to these numbers, right? But like, you can get 3 or 4 quality starters for $1.5 million. It's not an insignificant number, like make a difference for $1 million or whatever. Like, that really matters to Nebraska. Like, you can put more pieces around Kenny Minchey to be successful. That offensive line was a real problem this year. Like, $1.5 million could get you 2 really high quality guards. It can get you.
And Raiola would tell you that they could use some help across the offensive line.
100%. Like, he absolutely would. And I just think it's a move that in this era, if you're going to pay $3.5 million to a starting quarterback like they were with Dylan Raiola, he better be one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the country. Frankly, I mean, it's not the same, but I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. Like, I suffer most weekends, and there are stretches where Dak Prescott's the 11th best quarterback in the NFL. And when he's paid like when he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, it's hard to be successful when he's not playing to the level of Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. And it's the same thing in college. Like, if you're going to pay $3.5 million, you better get Fernando Mendoza-like production. You better get Cam Ward-like production. Otherwise, you're going to suffer because you're probably deficient elsewhere unless you're one of the biggest spenders in the country, like in Ohio State or in Oregon.
Yeah, very interesting there. We ran a poll in the YouTube chat. If you voted, we appreciate it. And Coop, this will be validating for you. They've got favorite quarterback in the transfer portal currently. With the most votes, you got Sam Leavitt taking 42%. Have him as the number 1 ranked player right now. Number 2 is Brendan Sorsby at 23%. Number 3, Drew Mestemaker at 20%. And then Tell Us Live in the chat is 15%. I'm doing my best to track down what the Tell Us Live is. But ultimately, you got Leavitt 1, Sorsby 2, Mestemaker 3, just as we have it. You agree with the fans?
Yeah, just giving the people what they want.
Exactly.
You know, I mean,
that's what we do. You wait to see what the YouTube chat says, and then you rank them.
All I'm hearing is Cooper hates G5 quarterbacks.
Yeah, you know, it just got him ranked number 3
Hates him by having him a 5-star. Yeah, number 3 in the country.
I will say something that will probably ruffle some feathers.
Please do.
A lot of it is, to me, just in the way these quarterbacks are perceived, is like, as we all know here on set, I'm a Louisiana boy. There's been a lot of discourse around what LSU is going to do at quarterback. Up until 24 hours ago, a lot of people that follow the program had no idea who Brendan Sorsby was. So you think about the guy that's had the most amount of exposure out of all those names that are ranked high. Who's it been? Sam Leavitt, nationally, right? Just from playing in a Big 12 championship.
Hey, is that Matt Zenitz?
Yeah, hey.
Is Matt Zenitz here?
Just want to let you know you're on camera real quick.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but when Matt Zenitz joins the party, we should probably welcome him, right?
What's
I
up,
didn't
buddy?
even realize I was on. So you guys got to see the great action shot of me returning a text.
I love it. We're seeing a lot of that from our Chris Hummer as well. The insiders are putting in some work. No, but I am being told that there is a reason that we're bringing you on, and that is for some Alabama updates. What's going on with the Crimson Tide today?
Well, most of all, I wanted to know why Cooper hates G5 quarterbacks. I didn't realize that level of hate. That's the thing that, like, I'm determined to figure out now.
We'll work on it.
Where does that stem from?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but as far as a non-G5 team, Alabama.
Run it back. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, as far as a team that's not at the G5 level, Alabama. So Alabama's season ended in an unfortunate way for Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide yesterday, but have a couple things on them. First of all, they've had some attrition that started. So Chris did a good job being on top of former blue chip running back Richard Young being set to enter the portal. And just put something out on my end on Jalen Hale, former top 40 overall recruited receiver, now being set to go into the portal as well. There will be some more attrition to go along with that, but a couple of the early guys, as far as former top recruits for Alabama, they're now set to leave the program. On a positive note for the Crimson Tide, They are losing Jam Miller at the running back position. That's not the positive part of it, but it creates a need for them at the running back spot. And one of the guys that they are in the mix for as a potential replacement is Hollywood Smothers from NC State. So led the ACC this year in rushing yards per game, averaged 85 rushing yards per game this season. Talented player. I think Cooper has him as the third best running back in the portal, one of the top ones as far as current free agents. He has 2 visits locked in at this point, Florida State and then also Alabama. So one to keep an eye on as far as Bama in terms of a potential replacement for Jam Miller.
Very interesting stuff there. Anything that's maybe surprised you coming out of their exit in terms of players that have now entered the portal, or just...
Still TBD. So they got back, I want to say, at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Local time, so 4 o'clock in the morning Central Time, coming out of their loss. And as I'm sure you can imagine, there are conversations that take place with the staff and players coming out of that. There will be ongoing dialogue and conversations these next couple of days, and then we will have more clarity, I would assume, at some point this weekend in terms of additional players that could be moving on. And obviously, I forgot Jalen Mbakwe also, who's
that's somebody that we've mentioned
at this point, former 5-star recruit who, to go along with the 2 that they talked about, is also going to be moving on.
Okay, real quick before I let you go, because it feels like the theme of the day is the quarterback position. Should we expect any news on Ty Simpson?
I'm curious to see what he does at this point. So the word that had gotten on Ty coming out of the regular season was that we was still in line to be a first-round pick if he turned pro. But at the same time, the way the playoffs played out, I can see where that wouldn't necessarily be a lock now, and where if you're Alabama, you can make a case to Ty and make a pitch to him in terms of why it makes sense to come back to school for another year. So a long-winded way of saying that for me, it's TBD right now, just based on the way that the playoffs played out.
I gotcha. All right. So you will update us if you get anything. We know that you will. Matt Zenitz, we appreciate you hopping on real quick to give us some Alabama updates. And guys, I'm going to do my best to relay it because I'm just now learning, that I'm the only one that could hear Matt Zenitz. So he's giving us some updates on what's happening at Alabama. You heard me, you can hear me at least, ask about Ty Simpson. Essentially, it's too early to tell. The team got back at like 4 a.m. after the Rose Bowl loss, and so still some things to work towards. But something that I want to ask you specifically about that he mentioned is just from the standpoint of, yes, we need to keep an eye on it, but there was a situation where it seemed pretty obvious that he was going to go to the NFL because he's getting some first-round grades. But based on what we've seen down the stretch with the SEC championship game and the playoff, he could be convinced to stick around. What do you think is the right decision for Ty Simpson?
He needs to go back to school. I mean, there was a month there where like I did one mock draft for CBS Sports NFL mock draft, and I had Ty Simpson go number 1 to the Saints. That was a long time ago. Since then, the Saints have won 6 games, and they're
not drafted number 1 anymore.
7-10, and they're getting ready to pick late in the top 10, right? So point being is, I think down the stretch, you saw him playing before that, excuse me, you saw him playing a like heroic level, especially with how one-dimensional they were and their lack of running game. They put a lot on his shoulders for a first-year starter. And talking to some teams in the NFL, they said, hey, even despite the level of play that he has shown really in the middle of this season, he's either going to have to keep that up really kind of to convince the majority of NFL talent evaluators that, okay, he can play himself into a top 10 pick, or more than likely he'll come down. There'll be some blemishes and obviously some adversity the rest of the season, and probably be best for him to go back to school. And by the way, a lot of people think that's the case for Dante Moore as well. Yeah. It's just one of those things, a supply and demand thing, right? Outside of Fernando Mendoza, who is there. So I think for Ty Simpson, especially the way that it ended, a really sour taste and being pulled from that game in the Rose Bowl, there's a situation out there, hypothetically, that I think would make sense for him to come back. And I think that he would be, certainly, given his pedigree, his intangibles, the level of play that he showed, he would be a guy. Those teams that we talked about that maybe weren't that interested in Sam Levitt, they'd look at Ty Simpson and they say, hell yeah, we'll take you. Come on, right now, whatever you want. You want $4 or $5 million, we'll take it, because we believe that you have the ability to develop into one of the first picks in the draft. And not only that, I mean, like, this year was kind of your learning. You didn't have a run game.
First year starting, he was a backup for 3 years.
Say what you want about Alabama and the way that they finished the season. They went to the quarterfinals and they gutted it out, right? And I know the expectations around that program. I'm not saying you got to celebrate that. I'm just saying, like, that was the floor of his performance individually. So this is a guy, if you put him in a better environment, which there are ones, I think there would be a lot of teams very, very intrigued with the plug-and-play option that he would be, not to mention everything from between the ears, the competitive nature, the type of guy that you're getting in the locker room is A+.
If something ends up happening with Ty Simpson, that he decides to stick around and enters the transfer portal again, we're working through hypotheticals at this point, but what do you anticipate?
I can say it if nobody wants to say it.
I mean,
that's something that we're keeping. It is. We need to keep it. Everything is on the table with this transfer portal, but what do you anticipate it, like a market or the trickle down effect could be potentially with Alabama?
Well, I mean, we all watched the game yesterday, right? Like, and Cooper and I were sitting there watching the game, and we were talking about Ty Simpson's future, because it makes it complicated. Not only is it about Ty Simpson, it's about Austin Mack, it's about Keelan Russell, the two back Alabama. It's about Kalen DeBoer's future.
And Austin Mack ended up entering the game.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. But like next year, like, I'm not saying like he just to the playoff, but like Alabama just got embarrassed in the playoff by Indiana. Like the pressure's on Kalen DeBoer next year. Like, does he want to go with Ty Simpson? Do you want to two younger quarterbacks who haven't really played a lot, who are very high ceiling guys, but just haven't seen the field much? And if you're Ty Simpson, like, if you stay, like, what happens? Because I have industry sources speculating that he could leave potentially. And this is all speculation. We need to say this here is the land of hypotheticals. And I'll let Cooper say it, because he's got a team in mind that I think makes a lot of sense, and it's his idea.
Yeah, I think it's Oregon. Or if Oregon, the way Chris put it, is there's teams out there that have the number one pick. Yeah. Oregon is one of the most desirable programs in the country, not because of what they offer just from a financial standpoint, but what they can offer from a player development standpoint. And then if you look at the last three quarterbacks under Dan Lanning, and the way Bo Nix is playing in the NFL right now, and the way Dylan Gabriel was able to perform for them in the 1 year that he was there, and now the way that Dante Moore will more than likely be a top 5 to top 10 pick, Oregon's a very, very reasonable destination with a lot of SEC ties in that organization, where financially it's not going to be an issue to get to where they want to go on either side. And if they really want him, that's a guy that's a plug and play option that, quite honestly, the three quarterbacks that they have brought in under Dan Lanning all have something to them in terms of like that maturity and cerebral ability that Thompson possesses. So that one to me would be the obvious fit. And a guy, like I keep talking about, the marriage of timelines, those guys are in the same timeline. Oregon wants to win a national championship. Ty Simpson wants to win a national championship. Ty Simpson wants to be the first quarterback drafted in the NFL draft. It's a perfect marriage. And he wants a run game too. Mm-hmm. And they spend heavy on the offensive line.
Yeah, very interesting stuff there. You have something to add, quick?
No, I think it's worth noting with Oregon. Cooper mentions they're one of the schools with the first pick. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that first pick doesn't end up going in the portal. And I think Oregon is a team, assuming Drew Mestermaker goes to Oklahoma State, that won't get some of their first picks. I'll put it that way. Or options for their first picks. And if that's the case, you look towards other options. And again, this is all hypothetical, if we get to a scenario where Ty Simpson is exploring those options, like they are a team that makes a ton of sense, like a high-level quarterback who's with proven production that can step in right away and continue a championship push. Like there are very few quarterbacks in the portal that are as productive as Ty Simpson was this year. And he's a guy we've seen Oregon turn into a draft pick, a high-level draft pick, 3 times in a row now? So they've had Dylan Gabriel's raised his stock. Bo Nix has raised his stock. Dante Moore, if he leaves, is going to be a first-round pick. And Ty Simpson would be a great marriage there if it did come down to that.
Yeah, that's something that we will continue to track. But you guys are giving us tons of comments in the YouTube chat, which we very much appreciate. We're going to answer your questions in just a bit. But first, I got to ask, we're getting very close to 200 likes. So go ahead, hit that thumbs up button. If you heard me say in the first hour that it doesn't matter, I was wrong. It really does matter. So hit that like button, get us to 200 here. And you'll probably also see in the YouTube chat that our friend Tom Loy is delivering some good little nuggets there. I'll read one out loud here. Once things are official, and he's in later today, I'm expecting 2025 top 207 tight end Brock Schott from Miami to visit Indiana this weekend and likely land there by the end of the weekend. That's interesting on multiple fronts. The fact that both of those teams are still playing in the college football playoffs right now, which leads me to a question that we've got here from @CF Kane fan. Sorry about your tight end, CF Kane fan, but he wants to know, how are these Final Four teams able to handle the portal while preparing for games? Chris, I imagine it's something similar to what you're doing right now, which is making phone calls, text messages on your computer, and answering my questions.
Yeah, it's a lot of both. And it's really interesting for the current Old Miss staff, because you also have a segment of them that are essentially huddling together at night.
That's a whole other
recruiting
problem
for a different team. So it's a very interesting process. But thankfully for these schools, the majority of them, they work at large institutions with large staffs. And the personnel department will handle the brunt end of the portal board and recruiting while the team is in the playoff. Coaches obviously jump in where they need to and recruit where they need to. But it's just kind of a juggling act that you have to handle. And I mean, you're getting punished for success in a way, but I don't think any of them would trade it.
Yeah. You're handling it very well, by the way. And I know you have some updates that you want to get us here on this transfer portal Palooza day.
We wrote an update at 24/7 this morning on some of the top guys, and I figured I would just take us through a few of them that we haven't hit on yet. I mentioned Caleb Hawkins earlier. Yep. Oklahoma State is the school I expect him to end up at.
The North Texas receiver.
Running back at North Texas. He led the nation in rushing touchdowns this season. And I think he's going to be a really big piece for Oklahoma State moving forward. Devin Tompkins is a guy that Cooper really likes. He's a big defensive lineman from USC. Schools I'm watching early include Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Oregon, kind of your usual suspects with the big defensive linemen, but those are some that have come up early. Darrell Gill, who I know is a guy Cooper really loves. He's a track star at Syracuse. He's also a very productive receiver. 2 schools that have come up early with him are Houston and Ole Miss, but I know other schools have sort of entered the picture with him. He's a very popular guy. I could see a Michigan or a Kentucky kind of entering the mix there with him. Ty Benenfield is a safety from Boise State. He is, if you talk to a personnel department, he is their favorite safety. He covers ground like nobody else in the portal. I think if he left right now, he'd be a early day 3 or a late day 2 NFL draft pick. SEC teams like Ole Miss, Georgia, and LSU are circling him. John Tez Williams, a cornerback from Iowa State. USC, Florida, Notre Dame are teams to watch out for there. I realize I'm just throwing names at y'all, but there's just a lot of updates and a lot of updates to go through. Chase Sowell from Iowa State is a guy I know Cooper loved last year. He came from East Carolina. He was at Iowa State for a season. He kind of started a little slow, but he emerged as one of the better receivers in the Big 12 by the end of the year. Headed to Penn State. I would be shocked if he wasn't. Xavier Chaplin, a guy that Cooper had as a top 10 player in the portal last year. He struggled a little bit with Auburn this year at times, but if you get him in the right context, maybe kick him out to right tackle where he's more of a natural fit, loses a little weight. I think he's a guy schools really love. Kentucky, Florida State, South Carolina are 3 schools to keep an eye on early. Bo Masco, a cornerback from Rutgers, is another top 50, 60 player in the portal. Texas, Ohio State, Old Miss are 3 schools I'm watching early. We could do this for a while. There's a lot of really impressive players out there that we're monitoring, but those are some updates on some of the guys at the top of our rankings.
Anybody that you want to expand on that he mentioned?
Xavier Chaplin's really interesting. He brought up a great point. And Chaplin was a guy that drew comparisons to Tyler Guyton, who was a first-round draft pick, the Dallas Cowboys a few years ago. He's big body. 6'7", hovering around 6'8". Put on some weight, and it just did not go as planned at Auburn, which happened for a lot of guys over there, right? He wasn't the only one. But if he can get his weight down, and Chris said it, flip over to the right side, I think that would do him a lot of well. South Carolina, I think you mentioned, and Kentucky and some of the other schools. I like the fit on that. And then a couple other guys. Who else you mentioned? Tompkins, obviously from USC. Big interior defensive line body that we haven't really talked about a lot, but he's a really good player. I'm
curious on your thoughts on Darryl Gill, because it's a guy we've talked about separately that I think I think the industry is catching up to you on that one.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to say. He's an interesting. I got to give Josh Edwards a shout out, who is helping us at CBS Sports on the portal as well. And this was a guy that he flagged because he really liked a lot. And Gill's a kind of more of a slight build, played at Syracuse, and these evaluations are really important just in terms of understanding the context, right? Because you see Gill, you look at his production or lack thereof, and you think, all right, how can this guy be a top 25 caliber player in the country? But after Stephen Jelly went down, it was rough with Ricky Collins and the rest of the Syracuse team. But you look at his track background, a guy that ran 10.7, which isn't blazing by any means if you're going to be on a track team, but he can move. He's got great short area quickness, and he has shown flashes of playing really tough, and quite honestly, the playmaking ability in traffic and yards after catch ability is pretty special. So he's a guy that I think his best football is ahead of him. And if you're Ole Miss, if you're Houston, 2 teams that have been involved, I would expect them to have a lot more company just in terms of recruiting him. It's funny, once we ranked him where we ranked him, we got some text saying, hey, we'd love for you to change that and bump him back down, but he is he's an exciting player. I'm excited to kind of see how he plays out, because comparably, another name that he brought up, he kind of reminded me of Chase Sowell, who ended up at Iowa State, who was kind of this projection coming over from East Carolina, and then found his footing late in the year. So I can kind of see the same trajectory for Gill.
All right, guys. I've mentioned the great questions that we're getting in the YouTube chat, but we also have some great intel. Tom Loy has been stepping in, and this is, I think you guys would agree, worthy of smash of that like button for the things that Tom Loy is delivering right now. Guys, he said, per a source, if Ty Simpson gets a first-round grade, he has gone to the NFL. If not, keep an eye on Oregon and Tennessee. What do you think about that, Chris?
I did bring up Tennessee earlier as a team to watch with a quarterback perspective for a reason.
We haven't heard a ton of action from Tennessee quite yet, right?
No.
This would be big action.
As somebody put it to me today, it has to be the right guy. Does that make sense? And
is Ty Simpson the right guy?
It depends. It depends on how much you want to invest in the quarterback position too. Ty Simpson would be very expensive, and Brandon Faison is not cheap. And I don't want to assume numbers because I'm not familiar with Brandon Faison's contract, but just based on what high caliber 5 stars of his ilk go for on the open market and what a guy like Ty Simpson would go for on the open market, you're talking about committing $6 or $7 million to your quarterback room. And
what's more expensive, a portal quarterback? I guess we can call him Cordell if you want to. Yeah. Portal QB or a 5-star that you're getting out of high school?
Well, it depends on who you are. Bryce Underwood is about the same as a high-profile portal QB. Yeah. But I think generally, for the majority of portal quarterbacks, the top-end ones are going to be more expensive than a high school quarterback. High school quarterback, you're drafting and you're projecting. A portal quarterback, it's more of a sure thing, and I think teams are willing to pay a little bit more for that. But yeah, I mean, I think Tennessee's a fascinating option in that perspective from Tom.
Yep.
He's obviously from that state. He has a lot of history with that program. And yeah, I mean, I don't think the door is shut on Tennessee just going with its quarterback room as constructed.
Yeah, Ty Simpson, a Tennessee native, the one that got away, as Vols fans will say, from a few years back when he committed to Alabama.
Can I say this?
Coaching. Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
He'd be the best. He'd be the best quarterback prospect that.
So you would put him above.
Well, I'm saying that Heupel had worked with.
Okay, best one so far.
And look what they did with Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, but also Nico Iamaleava was another 5-star quarterback.
Very different, just in terms of the cerebralness of the position.
Okay. And readiness, too. He's probably a guy that, like you mentioned, Faison Brandon, the 5-star quarterback that came in this class, but he would be a true freshman. So bringing in maybe somebody with more experience as a kind of to help Brandon get some time to learn.
It's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I mean, who else would you want him to learn behind?
Yeah.
You know, and you got a guy that sat for 3 years that understands the importance of it.
QB-friendly offenses that Ty Simpson would be.
It reminds me a lot of, like, this is not the best comparison, but I would imagine a similar conversation. Ty's probably on the higher side of it around Garrett Nuss last year. You know, where I think Nuss was maybe high side floating on the back end of the first round. Most people had him as a day 2 pick. And I wonder, after the Rose Bowl performance in the last month, where teams kind of view Ty Simpson. I think there would be a team that would take him in the first round, but I think the majority of teams would advise him to go back. So it's a fascinating spot.
Very interesting to see. Once again, Ty Simpson, not in the portal, but somebody that we are just keeping an eye on. And per our Tom Loy, it could be Tennessee and Oregon as 2 teams interested in his services, 2 of many, we assume. While we're mentioning some prospects, I know that Chris was just reading off the list of all the updates that he had. Some guys that kind of caught my eye were some that we would call maybe leveling up, you know, going from a group of 6, a Division II, FCS level, to the Power 4 level. And Coop, you have a fantastic list of just guys who could be that next prospect, that a name that we all need to know on. But if you had to choose one to give us a mention right now, who's a player you could see leveling up, kind of calling your shot like you did last year with Trinidad Chambliss? Yeah,
outside of the obvious.
Nailed that.
Jaden Craig's a really interesting one from Harvard. This was a guy that probably NFL teams and scouts are a little bit higher on than I'm at this point, and I haven't studied him to the extent that I'm comfortable with, but it's really easy to see why people like him. And he's been attached to a handful of teams that are competitive teams that are kind of in that 8-9 win category, both in the SEC and the Big Ten, that are looking to take that next step. And
he's gotten some like NFL love too, right? It's not just
absolutely. 60% passer at Harvard, but a guy just in terms of the arm talent, he's a really interesting one. And there's a lot of schools out there that, like, I got to give some credit to. Like, Monmouth does a phenomenal job. Elon does a phenomenal job. Old Dominion with Ricky Ronnie, like, got to give him a ton of credit. Outside of JMU, I mean, they're 10-3. They got a handful of guys in the portal. So I have to Jacksonville State, right? Like, I'm saying all this because these are the little guys that everybody just goes through the aisle and they pick through at the end of the day because they can't keep up, right? But these schools are doing a phenomenal job in terms of talent identification, evaluation, and player development. But that's not the question you asked. But if I had to go with one, it would be
you picked Jaden Craig.
Jaden Craig, and hold on, there's one more.
Second one, that wasn't
trying to get the name. Tight end from Andover, Minnesota. God, this kid's killing me. Luke Deineke from Andover, Minnesota. Kid that I think's got a chance to do some things.
Cooper, I don't want to put you on the spot, but there's another, I'm trying to remember his name, and it's not great. There's another quarterback from the same conference that Fair State was in this year. That's in the portal that people are very high on. He's a run-first guy.
Trivia time.
From the same league. And I'm wondering if you know who I'm talking about and also have watched that film a lot.
Do you know his name, or we're just playing?
We're just playing trivia time because I can't think of his name right now, but he's been very popular. I can get it for you.
Yeah, please get his name as I look it up. Hopefully I've watched him.
Do you think that opens up more possibilities for players at that level, considering what Trinidad Chambliss has done? How have you
In which way? In terms
like,
of,
just how have you seen personnel people be more open to finding somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Because there was probably a time that you scoffed at it, right? Oh, you can't play in the SEC.
Well, talent is talent. And I think Ole Miss, when they brought in Trinidad, it was like, we'll get an experienced kid as really kind of a plan B. And, you know, we don't know what we're getting, but we love the way that he's wired, and we know he's athletic, and he gives us a little bit of a different wrinkle with the athleticism and the ground game that he brings. And then it's just turned into this beautiful marriage with Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. and that team. So I think teams understand, like, talent is talent and what's projectable, right? Like size, speed, athleticism, toughness, instincts, all that stuff travels regardless of what level you play. But that's when the process of getting the player on campus is really important when you're recruiting D2 and FCS players, because there's guys out there that have done some really impressive stuff that you like on tape.
Yeah.
I've heard from schools, hey, this guy's coming in 15 pounds lighter than what he was listed on the site, or, you know, this guy's not what we thought in terms of the lower body mass. We don't think he can play in the league, right? We love the tape just like you did, and we're curious about it. Now we've gone through the next step of our process, and it's not what we thought.
Name for us?
I do. From Saginaw Valley, Mason McKenzie, a guy who I know has a Boston College visit set up, and I know a couple other P4 teams that really like him.
Yeah, fun little player. I remember that was a couple weeks ago that he probably jumped in because that was earlier than everybody else. But athletic, guy that can get it out from a lot of different arm slots. Fun, can extend plays. I think has only played 2 years. But yes, an intriguing name that I have to go back and watch now.
I had a G5 GM describe him as a better runner than Trinidad Chambliss, but a worse thrower.
Yeah,
which is, I mean, I feel like that's a wide array.
Right.
He is a guy that I know, just talking to a couple quarterback coaches in the P4, that teams are very intrigued by.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be a Trinidad Chambliss story. I think that's a once in a decade type thing for college football, but Mason McKenzie is a guy to have on your radar.
All right. Something else to have on your radar per our Power Mizzou's Gabe DeArmond. Missouri is the strong leader for Austin Simmons. Won't be officially announced until next week, but likely to see that connection there. Mizzou is a name that has come up quite a bit today when talking about the quarterback position, because that's ultimately been the theme of this transfer portal Palooza. A lot of names from quarterbacks, former five-star, transfer portal five-stars, as Cooper has named them as well. And so we'll continue to keep you updated on all of that. But as we wrap up this 2.5 hours here on Transfer Portal Palooza, I don't want to encapsulate it, Chris. I want to look forward. What do we think is next? This is day one. What are we anticipating from this 2 weeks of mayhem and the transfer portal being opened?
Next is hopefully some food and some sleep. At some
Not
point.
for you.
But as for the portal, we're not done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm waiting. Like, we talked about, like, for example, we talked about Jaden Ball earlier. Like, there are some big decisions left to be made. There are 4 teams still in the playoffs. I can think of several players out there that will be in the top 30 of Cooper's rankings pretty easily. They could still go in. Like, there's still people we're watching. And the way this cycle is going to work is visits are going to happen now. You're going to see a wave of commitments come over the next couple of days, but you're also going to see leverage plays. Like, as you get closer to the end of the portal, guys are going to jump in just in case, because this is your only chance to. A lot is going to happen over a 15-day period, and you're going to see a lot of kids taking visits and signing very quickly, but that doesn't mean action happen on the back half of this. Like, there's going to be a lot of stuff left to go. How
deep into the spring do you anticipate this news will be? Because I think that the perception is that since there's no spring transfer portal window, this will be wrapped up by a certain date.
I think a lot of it will be wrapped up because kids have to be in class. Like, ultimately, you have to be in class for the spring semester. And this is a fully professional sport at this point, built around an academic calendar. So guys still have to go to class, and that is the reality of the situation. But there will be a couple guys like left out there that might purposely maybe hang out a little bit longer and see if anything opens up, like if an injury happens in the spring, or if a team's unhappy with where it's at on the depth chart. I think there's opportunity out there for those guys if you're willing to take that risk. And I know a couple agents who are even kind of thinking about that right now. And I mean, not in the portal, but I think it's also a really good time in the spring to be a JUCO player in a way it hasn't been in a long time, because teams are going to have to fill holes somehow because the portal's not open.
Real quick, I have a important question. Sergeant 3229 has been asking you over and over again, so we need to make sure that we get this in before we say goodbye. He's asking about the Utah quarterback situation. Keeps asking how likely, Dampier and Bird are to entering. Of course, I think he's making the connection with his former head coach, Kyle Whittingham, now going to Michigan.
Yeah, Devin Dampier and Bird Ficklin would be very popular players if they were to enter the portal. I know Bird Ficklin re-signed before Kyle Whittingham left. And I think both players are very happy with their situations. There's kind of a Bryce Underwood question that looms out there that I think would kind of answer that question with those two, at least for Michigan's standpoint. If Bryce is staying, those two quarterbacks are not going to Michigan whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, I had a team ask me about Devin Dampier yesterday. So he is a guy that would have interest. He's a guy that also needs to be in a system fit in a way to do what he does best. But there are teams that definitely are interested in Devin Dampier, but I'm not saying anything is imminent anyway.
For all the attention that we saw from Oklahoma with the connection of Ben Arbuckle, their offensive coordinator, and John Mateer, they did a similar thing at Utah too with Jason Beck. But now we're finding out that Jason Beck is headed to Michigan. But of course, there's the Bryce Underwood of it all. So I hope that answers your question there. It's something that we're definitely going to continue to track. But Dampier will be a very popular name if he does enter the transfer portal. While we're wrapping up here, Coop, what do you anticipate we see over the next 15 days?
I think it's all going to center around the quarterbacks. That's kind of the easy, low-hanging fruit here. But I am fascinated by like the dominoes of those major four teams, Texas Tech, LSU, Miami, and Oregon. How's that going to play out? I think Sorsby is obviously the one to watch. And then after him, I mean, this all kind of hinges on like, what does Dante Moore do? Does he declare for the NFL draft? And then after that, what's the feedback we get on a guy like Ty Simpson? And just the way that it goes, it's more of like an intuition. I think we still have a lot of those, not a lot, some major needle movers still out there that have yet to enter the portal. And there's always a few stragglers that do. And, Michigan is not that far removed from playing their bowl game. Exit meetings are still happening. Players and staff are still getting acquainted with one another. So I find that fascinating. Texas as well, right? So we'll see what happens here over the next couple of weeks. And Chris and I also talked about, like, I think you're going to see a rush at the top in terms of the top end talent. And then after that, it will kind of be, the market will kind of even out. And then, those inflated numbers that I think agents and players thought they would be attached to will be a little bit more rational, as we like to say, and realistic.
I would very much think of this market as a funnel. Like, the money's up there at the top, it's very wide, but as you get further down and as you get further down the process, the money goes down and the pool of available spots narrows considerably.
Interesting. We're on the topic too of quarterbacks. Our Tom Loy adding that Ty Simpson would only go to Oregon if Dante Moore enters the draft, likely to get a first-round grade, as we've mentioned. But while we're on this subject, Chris, what are some of the other NFL dominoes that we're keeping an eye on? We've got Dante Moore, Ty Simpson, of course. Anybody else that kind of waiting to
in the quarterback market?
In the quarterback market.
Those are the two.
Those are the two.
Ones.
Okay.
Yeah, like this is it's an especially weak NFL draft class at quarterback, and there's not a lot of dominoes out there. Like, if this was 6 weeks ago, John Mateer would have been on that list, for example. But I think he's
got to be out of eligibility, though, right?
No, John Mateer.
No, he still has more. Okay,
has another year. Okay. Yeah, definitely always paying attention to John Mateer out here in Portal Land. But John Mateer has another year. But so guys like that. But the quarterback class in this case is just at the top, especially, is a lot of question marks. So Dante is the one that really controls the market, and then we'll see what happens with Ty Simpson as well.
He's still playing.
My last kind of hypothetical, if we want to go down that rabbit hole, is if Ty Simpson does end up departing Alabama, does Alabama go to the portal for a quarterback, or are they sitting tight with Austin Mack and Keelan Russell?
I don't have that answer right now, but if I was Kalen DeBoer and my job was on the line, I might want to prove and answer a quarterback. But they would also be, given where we are in the cycle right now, very late to the party. And
this is day one, right?
It's day one.
Day one,
but
you're already late.
Day
one
one, you're
started
very
a
late.
month and a half ago.
Yeah, day one, you're very late, and there's no spring portal to force somebody in at this point. So it would be a precarious spot for Alabama if Ty Simpson decided to move on. But also, like, it's not like that's a reality Alabama has been preparing for months. Like 2.5 months ago, Cooper had Ty Simpson as the number one player in the draft, and I think Alabama thought Ty Simpson would be going to the league. But it's amazing what can happen after 4 quarters, and the context is a lot different coming out of yesterday's Rose Bowl.
Yep, still a lot to be decided. It is day one, but according to Chris Hummer, if you're not in or you're not ready, you're late because day one is already underway. Still a lot to be decided. What's the count we have right now before we say goodbye?
Oh, that's a great question. We're up to 2608 FBS.
2608 in FBS. Day one here of the transfer portal. We hope you've enjoyed us here on Transfer Portal Palooza. One last ask. Hit that like button on your way out. And do not forget that we have a promo code going right now. You can use the code PORTAL for 60% off your annual VIP membership. Chris Hummer, Cooper Patagna. I'm Emily Proud. Thanks for joining us here on the YouTube page for CBS Sports College Football or on X. Once again, hit that like button on your way out. And thanks for joining us on Portal Palooza.